While working overtime in the office, Itsuki Shinomiya, the main character of our story, often thought about what he would have done if he ended up in a different world. His health declined as he tirelessly worked, resembling a tired JJK animator after animating Sukuna's battles. Despite his hard work, he couldn't save much money and his life lacked a clear purpose. As he waited for his metro, he pondered these thoughts, avoiding anime or manga but staying aware of the trending idea of parallel universes. Considering his potential role in a different world, Itsuki struggled with the decision of becoming an adventurer or a hero. Exhausted from his current job, he wished for a life without the burdens of work. Lost in these thoughts, he drifted into sleep. Suddenly he woke up to the announcement that the train had arrived. He hurriedly got up, relieved that he hadn't missed it. As he entered the train, a sweet voice greeted him. Before him stood a girl in unique clothes and glasses. Intrigued, Itsuki asked about her. The girl revealed she was a goddess and said he was meant for another world. Thinking it was a joke, Itsuki brushed it off and tried to leave. Suddenly the girl snapped her fingers, revealing her true divine nature. She explained Itsuki had died, and she wanted to give him a second chance at life, a fresh start. The goddess offered to give him a useful skill in his new life, presenting him with many options to choose from. Still reeling from the shock of his own death, Itsuki hesitated. He stood on the brink of entering a parallel universe, and recognized the significance of choosing the right skill. Initially tempted by combat skills, he soon realized what he truly needed to pick. The card indicated that he would lead an enjoyable second life, but the goddess insisted there were superior choices available. Nevertheless, Itsuki remained resolute in his decision to select that particular option. With a radiant burst of light, the goddess was ready to transport him to the first town of the new world. As Itsuki opened his eyes in this unfamiliar realm, he heard unsettling sounds around him. In response, he swiftly spun around and dashed away in a frenzied sprint. Itsuki had certainly not anticipated such a hostile reception. A colossal nightmarish sandworm loomed before him, poised to strike. During this perilous moment, he questioned how he had ended up in this situation after choosing a seemingly peaceful and enjoyable life. Suddenly, a mysterious person appeared and skillfully sliced the sandworm in half, saving Itsuki from danger. After dusting himself off, Itsuki thanked the man who rescued him. The stranger, named Hayato, revealed that he too was a drifter reincarnated in this unfamiliar world. Itsuki noticed 4 other girls with Hayato, and some weren't even human. The other world seemed like a harem-like world to Itsuki's eyes. Hayato felt a touch of nostalgia after hearing some things from Itsuki. They all got into a chariot to head to the town. Later, Hayato asked about the unique skill Itsuki had chosen when he encountered the goddess. Itsuki grinned and assured them that they would be amazed when he revealed his skill. He extended his hand and created a coin out of thin air. His skill allowed him to generate money based on his level, so he no longer needed to work for a living. The revelation surprised the others. Hayato had asked about his future plans. The powers given to him by the goddess were mainly good for making a bit of money and doing some farming. He wasn't really interested in going on adventures or fighting monsters. When Hayato suggested joining a guild, Itsuki got excited about the idea. Hayato said he could focus on getting better at alchemy if he didn't want to fight. They were getting close to the town they had left, so Itsuki stayed behind, and the others continued to their destination. Itsuki knew he had to find a guild as his first step. He planned to use the money he made to get what he needed and live a peaceful life surrounded by beautiful women just like the pair that he just passed by. He didn't feel in a hurry and wanted to take things easy, avoiding unnecessary stress. He had satisfied his hunger by buying some skewered beef. Later, he decided to check the map Hayato had given him, thinking about the chance of joining an alchemy guild. The beef tasted amazing. While he walked down the street enjoying his food, a girl suddenly came up to him. Her eyes showed desperation, and she seemed like a cat girl with cat ears, a tail, and torn clothing. Her youthful appearance stood out. Itsuki went over to her and asked if she was lost or needed help, even offering some of his food. Unfortunately, she didn't respond. It was clear that the girl was starving and she wore an iron collar around her neck, a sign that she was a slave. The slave trader informed Itsuki that he couldn't feed slaves without permission when her master arrived. Seeing the girl's young appearance made the slave trader question if she was really a slave. He then asked Itsuki if he wanted to buy her. The slave trader, named Yas, was declined by Itsuki, who was saddened by the existence of such practices in the world. In an attempt to help, Itsuki distracted the slave trader and secretly gave some food to the girl before leaving quietly. Itsuki's next stop was the Alchemy Guild. Remembering Hayato's advice, he decided to create guild cards first. Upon entering, Itsuki met an elderly woman enjoying a long pipe cigar. She asked him directly why he was there. Itsuki explained his desire to join the Alchemy Guild, introducing himself and mentioning Hayato's recommendation. Surprisingly, the old woman already knew about his arrival and past issues with the aristocracy. She assured him that he didn't need a letter of introduction and handed him the card. When Itsuki took the card from her, she grabbed his hand and suddenly it burst into flames. After the fire was extinguished, he finally got the guild card from her. The elderly woman told him there wouldn't be a special exam since he was just starting. Following this, she brought up the registration fee, which was 5,000. Itsuki accepted her condition and asked her to teach him alchemy. The old woman suggested he address her as the beautiful Reinrich. Itsuki repeated his request, this time calling her beautiful Reinrich. Reinrich, noticing his repeated request, suspected he wasn't entirely truthful. She guessed he might already possess some alchemy skills. To assess his abilities, she decided to test him and led him to the laboratory. She instructed him to create basic potions manually. Itsuki questioned why he should do it manually when he could use his skills. However, she reiterated that he needed to start with the fundamentals. Although he could use magic instantly, lacking knowledge meant the final product's quality would suffer, and he might even fail. Therefore, practice was the most effective way to achieve perfection. She explained the basic principles of alchemy to him: disassembly, synthesis, and reconstruction. She stressed that understanding these three concepts was crucial for further learning. This information closely resembled what Itsuki had seen in manga and anime. She suggested starting with disassembly since it laid the foundation for alchemy. Their training began with Reinrich teaching Itsuki how to disassemble objects. For Itsuki, the process became increasingly challenging, requiring hard work that he had hoped to avoid. Despite the difficulty, he gained knowledge and produced numerous potions. During this time, a young girl entered the room. Reinrich instructed her to prepare a meal for Itsuki, who was extremely fatigued and low on energy. Itsuki enjoyed the meal and the tea the girl brought. While they ate, Reinrich revealed that she saw potential in Itsuki and advised him against working at an establishment. His response was one of shock and speechlessness, prompting Reinrich to tell him not to make such a disgusted expression. She assured him that she would arrange for a temporary bed for him to stay. She planned to go to the Adventurous Guild the next day to sell the potions Itsuki had made. Despite being of low-grade quality, these potions were always in demand. Reinrich asked if he needed money, and Itsuki quickly said yes without any hesitation. The following day, while they were at the market, a man was stealing from someone else, armed with a knife. He hurried through the street, causing fear in everyone he passed. However, his path crossed with two girls who stood their ground, stopping his advance. When the thief tried to retaliate, a girl named Aina quickly brought him down to the ground. The other girl, with a cat-like character, expressed her admiration for Aina's brave fight. When Aina asked if she had gone too far, the cat girl reassured her that she hadn't because the man was still alive. The folks nearby quickly knew Aina and Sorte from the Red Front. They worked together to get back the stolen thing from the thief and gave it back to the owner. At the same time, Itsuki and Reinrich heard the noise. Reinrich told Itsuki he'd be at the Adventurer Guild if Itsuki went straight down the road, and then they split up. After traveling for some time, Itsuki finally reached the guild. He never thought he'd start a business in the new world so quickly. Everything had been going smoothly. Itsuki walked into the Adventurers Guild carrying a bag provided by Hayato that could magically store a lot in a small space. He was surprised when he looked around inside. Many drunk people stared at him as he walked in. Itsuki tried his best to look calm even though he could feel the intense gazes. A staff member, a young woman, came up to Itsuki and asked if he needed any help. In response, Itsuki wanted to sell some potions. He neatly set them on a nearby table and requested the best deal from the girl. The room felt tense, with onlookers giving serious looks, making it more uncomfortable. The girl checked Itsuki's potions and sadly told him they were all low quality. At that moment, a bald man came up and asked the girl if there were any quests. Accidentally, he bumped into Itsuki, causing all his potions to break. Laughter burst out among the men present, showing clearly that they had no plans to let Itsuki sell his potions there. They mockingly called him the Pharmaceutical Guild Seller, leaving Itsuki confused and hurt by the strong dislike directed at him. It was hard to understand why they despised him so much, considering the effort he had put into crafting those potions. Things took a more serious turn when a bald man went too far by grabbing Itsuki and testing his patience. Despite the efforts of fairies to intervene and calm things down, the bald man took it a step further by drawing his sword. This left Itsuki frustrated that his potions were ruined and angry that someone was now trying to harm him. This only strengthened Itsuki's determination to confront the bald man. The conflict was on the verge of getting dangerous when Aina intervened. She stopped the argument, realizing the need for a quick resolution. Aina, acknowledging the tense situation, took Itsuki's hand and encouraged him to leave. Onlookers, especially noticing Aina's impressive beauty, watched the scene unfold. Itsuki promptly clarified that he wasn't part of the Pharmaceutical Guild, but was associated with the Alchemy Guild. The bald man pointed to the bag typically used by the Pharmaceutical Guild, but Itsuki showed his guild card to confirm his Alchemy Guild affiliation. The bald man recognized his mistake, personally apologized to Itsuki, and acknowledged the misunderstanding. Itsuki assured Aina that it wasn't just a misunderstanding but a mistake on the part of the man who acted without checking the facts. He also mentioned the significant loss of his potions. Suddenly, Sorte scolded Itsuki for not thanking Aina after her intervention, but Aina defended him, saying it wasn't his fault. She decided to compensate Itsuki for the potions that had been destroyed. Aina then appealed to Itsuki for forgiveness. Reinrich also arrived at the scene, and everyone recognized her, although she didn't seem to be in a good mood. She informed them that their products had been ruined and that she wouldn't overlook it this time. Reinrich requested them to contact the guildmaster without delay. Itsuki approached her and expressed his apologies for failing to handle the potions properly. Reinrich reassured him that it wasn't his fault and advised him not to blame himself. However, Itsuki continued to feel deep regret. Reinrich shared the surprising news that the Alchemy Guild wouldn't be working with them anymore, leaving everyone shocked. Their only other option was to buy potions from the expensive pharmaceutical guild, which they weren't happy about. The suddenly polite man also said sorry to Itsuki for his earlier aggressive behavior, admitting he didn't know who Itsuki really was. Aina apologized to Reinrich and asked how they could make things right. Then Reinrich revealed that Itsuki got a recommendation letter from Hayato, the famous dragon slayer hero. Everyone in the guild was genuinely shocked. Itsuki was astonished because he had no idea he was talking to such a big celebrity. The guildmaster promised to make up for the trouble with a payment of 1 million nar for the losses. However, Reinrich thought that a single-digit million nar amount wouldn't be enough, and Sorta remained opposed to the idea as Fairies doesn't have the means to pay the large sum. Itsuki started wondering if the compensation was too much, and Reinrich emphasized Itsuki's connection to Hayato once again, and continued acting mad. Itsuki felt unsure about who was the real victim in this situation. She insisted they find a way to raise the required amount. Then Aina shocked everyone by proposing to become a slave to earn money and settle the debt. This left both Sorte and Itsuki equally shocked. Everyone tried to dissuade her from making this drastic decision, highlighting potential negative consequences such as a decline in the Adventurer Guild's reputation if she became a servant. Aina reassured them, saying people would always need the services of the Adventurer Guild. Fairies expressed the greatest concern and pleaded with Aina not to make a rash decision. Aina embraced Fairies and assured her that everything would turn out fine. Itsuki once again voiced his disapproval of Reinrich's decision, but she remained steadfast in her stance. Sorta raised her voice loudly, strongly objecting to the idea that her sister should become a slave just because some potions were destroyed. She insisted that, as a knight, she could take care of herself. Sorta questioned who would manage their guild in Aina's absence. Aina once more begged Reinrich for forgiveness, but Reinrich firmly declined. Itsuki started to wonder why he came here initially, hoping for a carefree and simple life, only to end up in the opposite situation. He contemplated how to handle such a lovely person as a companion. However, he ultimately refused again, stating that slavery wouldn't solve their problems. He firmly declined to keep Aina as a slave and declared his intent to work even harder to produce more potions. Aina initiated an argument asserting that she would excel as a servant and be valuable. Itsuki responded by stating that he could not accept a lovely girl like her as a servant. Upon hearing this, Aina blushed. Reinrich remained eager to acquire a girl from the Red Front for his labor. Attempting to convince Itsuki, she insisted that he would need more help in his future work. Accusing him of being too kind, Reinrich was determined not to return empty-handed. She instructed Aina to come to her residence the following morning. After that, Itsuki noticed that she paid no attention to his or anyone else's words. They departed, leaving Itsuki feeling incredibly weary. He never anticipated that his life here would be so burdened with challenges. He headed directly to his bed, yearning for some rest. However, he was abruptly jolted awake by a voice and the sensation of touching something that left his hand feeling numb, accompanied by a pleasant fragrance. Itsuki was shocked when he realized it was Aina, only half-dressed and lying in his bed. Panicking, Itsuki swiftly vacated the bed, demanding an explanation for why she was there. Aina responded that Reinrich informed her that this was what a slave should ideally do. Itsuki grew more irritated with Reinrich, and he closed his eyes, instructing Aina to dress herself. In desperation, Aina asked why he wasn't content with her and if something was wrong with her body. Suddenly, Sorta entered the room and aimed a kick at Itsuki, believing he was forcing Aina into these actions. This prompted both Sorta and Itsuki to engage in a heated skirmish, resembling a cat-and-mouse fight. Aina tried to clarify to Sorte that it was all a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Reinrich listened to what was happening upstairs and reminisced about her own youth. Shinomiya Itsuki, a man sent to a new world by a goddess, faced giant worms and went through tough times. Finally, he met an unusual girl who seemed willing to be his servant. Aina told him he should start taking responsibility for her since she was now under his care. She persistently called him master. Itsuki felt uneasy about this, and Aina assured him she could use other terms like lord, honey, darling, or my liege. Then she suggested calling him her precious one, explaining that it's customary in her culture to use such terms for a spouse after the first night together. Just then, Sorte passionately declared her intention to regain Aina's freedom, stating that they didn't need such titles anymore. Later that day, as they walked through the streets, Itsuki asked if she really wanted to buy Aina's freedom. Aina herself said she couldn't do it, fearing it would raise doubts about her sincerity. Itsuki assured them that it wouldn't be a problem for him since he needed money, but Aina insisted that her decision was firm. Sorte declared determinedly that she wouldn't leave Aina alone and intended to accompany her everywhere to make sure Itsuki didn't do anything inappropriate. Itsuki then questioned Aina about her plan to visit someone involved in enslavement. He couldn't understand why someone who seemed flawless in demeanor would behave this way. Her actions left him completely confused. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, a feeling of sadness and hopelessness took over everyone. The bald man deeply regretted Aina's enslavement, blaming himself for it. Despite this, fairies tried to explain that Aina had left them in charge of the guild even when she wasn't there. They needed to carry out their duties responsibly instead of giving in to sadness. After hearing fairies' words, the spirits of everyone in the guild were lifted. They became eager and prepared enthusiastically to get back to their work. Later that day, Reinrich met a little old man he knew. The old man ran an armor shop. Reinrich asked how his business was doing, and the man said it was doing well. Reinrich also asked about his new apprentice and whether they were doing a good job. Meanwhile, Itsuki, Aina, and Sorte reached the residence of the slave trader. It was a huge mansion. They couldn't believe that a slave trader owned such a grand place. They entered and started looking for the owner. A woman welcomed them, guessing that Reinrich had sent them. The outside of the mansion was beautiful, but the inside was even more impressive. Then Yasis, the slave trader, appeared. Itsuki met him at the beginning and said hello. The woman then offered Itsuki some tea, her upper body partly visible. Itsuki felt nervous while watching her. She was even more attractive than Aina. Yasis noticed everything and asked Itsuki if he had a liking for Wendy the woman. Itsuki blushed and explained that what had just happened wasn't as it appeared. Yasis then disclosed that her name was Wendy, a product of their company. Itsuki was surprised, finding it difficult to believe that such a beautiful girl could be considered a slave. Sorta pinched his thigh and encouraged him to keep talking. Yasis then informed Aina that he would assess her worth as a companion, noting that she was in relatively good condition and affiliated with the Red Front. Surprisingly, he also included Sorte in his evaluation. She objected, stating that she wasn't part of the original arrangement. Yasis responded by explaining that Reinrich had informed him of the total amount of money involved, and Aina alone wouldn't be valuable enough. He suggested that Sorte could also lessen her financial responsibility by becoming a companion. Upon hearing this, Sorte was ready to compromise, but Aina grew concerned. Sorte reassured her, assuring her that everything would be okay as they would be together forever. Wendy guided them towards the exit, and Aina and Sorte followed. Meanwhile, Yasis provided Itsuki with information about slavery in this world. He explained 3 types: debt slaves owing money, criminal slaves captured for crimes, and special slaves for royal, tribal, or unique reasons. In Itsuki's case, he would be a debt slave. Wendy asked Aina if she was skilled in combat as an adventurer. Aina affirmed. Then Wendy inquired about Aina's cooking experience. Aina replied negatively. Sorta chimed in saying she can cook if it's for camping. Wendy then asked them to remove their clothing. Aina and Sorte were surprised to hear this, but they had no other option. They took off their clothes and stood in their underwear, feeling very uncomfortable. Wendy instructed them to turn around. When Aina turned around, Wendy began touching her chest and private parts, saying that if Itsuki asked her to do something, she should be able to do it even if it was physical. She assumed they were both still virgins. Sorte pushed Wendy away. Meanwhile, Yasis had finished explaining all the terms of slavery to Itsuki. Shortly after, Wendy arrived with Aina and Sorte, both blushing and feeling very shy. Itsuki asked Aina what happened, but she refused to answer, saying it was embarrassing. Itsuki insisted, and Sorte got upset, pushing Wendy away and shouting at Itsuki for not respecting their request not to ask. Yasis had just announced the girl's stats. Aina was skilled in combat and handling various situations, while Sorte excelled only in combat. In essence, both of them were formidable fighters, but not much else. Yasis expressed disappointment upon seeing Sorte's stats and explained that it was because she was underage, preventing her from completing her training. Sorte, feeling defensive, shouted that it wasn't anyone else's concern. Wendy intervened, sharing her findings after personally investigating. She discovered that having intercourse with Sorte might be challenging, since her body was particularly sensitive to tickling. Yasis concluded the final assessment, deciding on 6 million nar for Aina and 4 million nar for Sorte. Together, they now matched the compensation amount. It was time for the contracts. He instructed everyone to stand in a circle and join their hands. Following Yasis's guidance, they obediently complied. Yasis then recited some incantations, forming a contract between them. Despite causing slight discomfort, the contract was now firmly established. Yasis explained that the contract prevented the slaves from harming their master, acting as a protective measure. Intrigued, Itsuki asked Sorte to test it. Without hesitation, Sorte attacked Itsuki. She immediately began rolling on the ground, clutching her head. Yasi explained that trying to hit their master would result in a terrible headache. Mockingly, Itsuki warned Sor that any violent behavior would lead to trouble. Aina chuckled and remarked that it seemed like they were enjoying each other's company. Itsuki and Sorte both protested, saying they weren't. After this exchange, the three of them left the mansion, satisfied that the contract had been successfully established. Itsuki, uncertain of their next steps, turned to Aina for guidance. She suggested they should report to Gil. On the same night in the city suburbs, Hayato and his crew set up camp in a designated area. While Hayato was away searching for food, the four girls accompanying him patiently waited for his return. One of them strongly desired meat. The elf girl, coming out of the bath partially undressed, made the others feel uneasy. She insisted they exclude meat from the soup as she planned to eat it separately. Another group member cautioned her against walking around half-naked, fearing that Hayato might see her in such a state. The elf girl responded by telling the human girl, Letty, not to overreact. She then suggested that Letty should also bathe in the spring, hinting that she had an unpleasant odor, leading to an argument between the two of them. Meanwhile, Hayato sat quietly in one spot as Chris came over and put a blanket on him to shield him from the cold weather. Hayato in turn shared his thoughts, expressing curiosity about how Itsuki was doing. At that very moment, Itsuki was at the Adventurers Guild, having a good time with the same people who had treated him badly before. They were all saying sorry for their past actions and asking for forgiveness. Itsuki responded by talking about the many experiences he had in his previous world. The men remembered that Itsuki was a drifter, and they started imagining a better future together, looking forward to amazing potions from Itsuki. On the other hand, Sorte was furious seeing the men enjoying themselves, the same people who were the cause of their enslavement. Her emotions intensified due to her intoxication, and she loudly accused Itsuki of having inappropriate intentions towards them in public. Itsuki was surprised by Sorte's statement and firmly reassured her that he would never entertain any inappropriate thoughts about her, emphasizing that it was because of Sorte's appearance as a kid. Sorte had been growing increasingly agitated. She questioned Itsuki, asking if he understood the downsides of having a well-endowed chest. She pointed out the difficulties, such as the need for larger, heavier armor that cost more. Itsuki, under the influence of alcohol, responded that he didn't care since they were now his slaves. He went on to express his weariness of such complex relationships and declared that he would refrain from discussing such matters with Sorte any further. His new friends invited Itsuki to continue drinking, and Sorte cautioned Aina not to trust him too easily. However, Aina observed Itsuki genuinely enjoying the company of even those who had previously disliked him. This caused her to reconsider her impression of him, and she blushed, realizing he might not be the person she had thought. Meanwhile, Itsuki started liking the beauty of this strange world. However, someone got worried about the cost of having a late-night party. Itsuki smiled and showed that he could make coins. He proudly displayed a single silver coin he had made, even though it wasn't enough to cover all the expenses. As the night went on and more drinks were consumed, everyone in the bar eventually fell asleep. Itsuki found himself thinking about how he had met so many people in this new world, and things were getting better every day. The fact that he had died in his previous life and was now experiencing all this in a new one was still something he found hard to fully understand. Itsuki had two slaves, both beast adventurers from the renowned Red Front Party. They helped him collect alchemical ingredients, and as a result, his skill level increased steadily. His work went smoothly, and he could now proceed at his own relaxed pace. This allowed him to earn some extra income, which grew consistently day by day. He even reached a point where he could create a gold coin instead of a silver one, with each gold coin equivalent to 100,000 nar. With a good amount of funds at his disposal, Itsuki's only plan was to indulge and enjoy himself without any other pressing obligations. Although he had envisioned a profoundly peaceful life, his new reality was filled with numerous troubles. Despite this, there was a gradual improvement in his situation. Most of his time was spent in the dim alchemy room with Reinrich, an elderly lady who pointed out his errors. Through this, he felt a sense of detachment from it all. Itsuki had only a bit of knowledge about the town, but he was really curious to check out what it had to offer. He was particularly interested in finding a brothel. The tricky part was that there was no town map available. So even if he decided to visit such a place, he had no clue which way to go, except for knowing how to get to the inn and alchemy shop. Suddenly, Yasis appeared, and Wendy greeted Itsuki warmly, saying good morning. Yasis asked if he could join Itsuki for a walk, and since Itsuki had the day off, he agreed. Itsuki shared his desire to explore, but confessed he didn't know much about the city. Yasis suggested that Wendy could be a guide for him. He also mentioned that Wendy could help relieve Itsuki's fatigue. So Wendy stayed with Itsuki while Yasis left. On their first day out, they went to a clothing store. Some of the clothes looked too fancy on Itsuki, and it was the first time he had gone shopping with a girl. Wendy decided to try on some clothes and asked Itsuki how she looked. The shop girl suggested Wendy try more clothes, saying she looked stunning. Itsuki told the girl to pack both sets of clothes. Wendy was surprised and assured Itsuki that she would take good care of them. Itsuki was starting to feel attached to Wendy, especially when she mentioned helping him relax, as Yasus had suggested. Wendy took Itsuki's hand and led him to a nearby restaurant. Itsuki was really enjoying the experience. After having some coffee at the restaurant, they went to the market together. All of a sudden, a man showed up and called out to Wendy. He asked her why she was there, and Itsuki wondered if she knew him. Itsuki explained that Wendy had been showing him around the city. Itsuki made it clear that he didn't plan to buy Wendy. Feeling uneasy, Wendy told Itsuki that the man was Dedarl, the son of an important person in the city. Dedarl declared that he already got 120 million nar to buy Wendy. He questioned Itsuki if he could actually afford her at such a huge price. Aina sternly told Itsuki to stay away from Wendy. Itsuki was shocked to learn that Wendy was worth 120 million nar. In response, Dedarl started shouting to call for Yasus. Itsuki firmly held onto Wendy and assured her that even if he hadn't paid for her, he would protect her if she chose not to stay with Dedarl. Meanwhile, Aina and Sorte went hunting in the forest. Sorte shared his concerns that no matter how much they hunted, everything would eventually be taken by Itsuki. Aina tried to explain that it was all part of their agreement, as she had truly accepted Itsuki as her lord. However, Sorte couldn't hide her reluctance and told Aina that she could never be Itsuki's eternal servant. On the other hand, Itsuki was confidently asserting himself as Wendy's current owner. Dedarli then bragged about his father's significant influence in the city, implying that messing with him would be unwise. Itsuki, however, mocked both Dedarl and his father, showing no fear or respect. Neither Itsuki nor the man were willing to give up their claim over Wendy. Curious, Wendy asked Itsuki if he was genuinely prepared to buy her. Itsuki was left without an answer as he didn't have the required funds. Just then, Yasus arrived on the scene, and Dedarl exclaimed that he had arrived at the perfect moment. He began shouting at Yasus, explaining that he had been collecting money to buy Wendy. Yasus confidently asked Dedarl if he had the needed 120 million. In response, Dedarl pointed at Itsuki, questioning if he had given him the 120 million. Dedarl continued to boast, trying to intimidate Yasus by hinting at risks in opposing his father. However, Yasus remained unfazed and instead asked Dedarl what he would do if he went against his father's wishes. Itsuki's thoughts shifted to Reinrich as he observed Yasus. Dedarl assured Yasus that he would get the money at any cost, but requested that Yasus keep any potential suitors away from Wendy for the time being. Yasus smiled and surprised both Dedarl and Itsuki by suggesting a battle for ownership of Wendy, catching Itsuki off guard with such a proposition. After a short while, Sorte and Aina went to find Reinrich to ask about Itsuki's location. Reinrich told them he was in the back room. They knocked on the door a few times, but when there was no response, they ended up breaking the door to get in. Inside, they found Itsuki working at a table covered with shiny rings and jewelry that caught Sorte's attention. Itsuki then shared what happened in the market earlier, explaining everything to them. When Sorte learned about Dedarl's father, she got agitated, emphasizing his influence in the city. Itsuki began worrying about getting involved with a powerful adversary. He felt a bit foolish and asked Sorte to stop insulting him, but Sorte remained annoyed with his actions. Aina stepped in, urging Sorte to stop criticizing Itsuki. She explained that Itsuki's actions were meant to protect Wendy. Sorte disagreed, suggesting that he did it because he wanted attractive women with melons around him. Aina confessed to Itsuki that she had planned to show him the city soon, but now it seemed unnecessary since Wendy had already done that. Sorte continued to disagree, leading Aina to ask about the nature of the competition Itsuki was involved in. Itsuki had a plan to gather 120 million nar initially, but Yasus later reduced it to 80 million nar. At the moment, Itsuki only had 3.5 million nar, while Dedarl already had 50 million nar. That's why Itsuki's target remained at 120 million nar. The time limit was just 1 week, but Itsuki was falling behind in collecting the money. He still needed to get an additional 7 million nar to secure victory, which is why he was putting so much effort into crafting those sparkling accessories. Sorte was surprised to learn that Wendy was valued at 120 million nar. This made her feel quite envious because her own worth was only 4 million nar. Wendy was 30 times more valuable than Sorte, and she began to wonder if it was all because of Wendy's ample bosom. Driven by jealousy, Sorte once again pulled Itsuki's hair, but Aina stepped in and separated them. Itsuki had informed the girls that they needed more materials for him to continue making accessories. Aina offered to join him during their free time to help with the task. Worry filled her because of the unsettling rumors surrounding Dedarl. Itsuki trusted her to take care of him and recognized that it was time to sell some potions at the guild. Aina expressed her newfound admiration for Itsuki, convinced that he was truly a good person. Sorte suggested they leave, eager to release her pent-up anger on something or someone. Quickly, they set off on a hunt. Meanwhile, Wendy couldn't help but feel anxious. Itsuki was taking a significant risk just for her. However, Itsuki had made a promise to succeed at any cost. Doubts lingered in Wendy's mind about how he would accomplish this, but Yasus reassured her, asserting that this gamble would bring good fortune to both of them this time. Yasus reassured Wendy and told her to stay calm. Wendy was anxious because she was afraid that Yasus might sell her to Datel at a high price. Yasus, however, asked if she had a good day. Wendy said yes and mentioned she had a good time with Itsuki. Yasus encouraged her to pursue that happiness again. Still nervous, Wendy asked why Yasus came up with such a game. Yasus explained that even though collecting so much nar in just a week was tough, he believed Itsuki wouldn't abandon her. Meanwhile, Itsuki felt tired from making the accessories Reinrich had suggested. She advised him to take a short break, emphasizing that pushing too hard would only make things more complicated. She encouraged him to share the whole story, and Itsuki went on to explain everything to her. Reinrich knew that Itsuki often got into conflicts with others, but he mentioned that there was something he wanted to discuss with her. Itsuki clarified that there was a limit to how many accessories he could sell, and asked if he could sell some potions without the guild's help. Taking a moment to think, Reinrich then inquired if Itsuki knew about the business Dadarl's father was involved in. Itsuki guessed it might be a pig farm, but from Reinrich's expression, he realized that Dadarl's father was actually the pharmacy guild manager. Itsuki realized that selling potions without the guild's help would be very tough. Feeling encouraged, he remembered he could ask Hayato for assistance. Itsuki took out his guild card, a way to talk to Hayato. When he reached out, Itsuki asked how Hayato was doing, making sure he was okay. Hayato, in the middle of battling a huge beast, reassured him that he was fine. Itsuki then asked if he could use the items from the magic bag Hayato had given him. Hayato said he could use anything from the bag, but some items had level restrictions. Itsuki understood this and impressed Hayato with his quick learning. While they talked, Hayato continued to fight the beast. What a Chad. Itsuki mentioned that next time he would bring the ore he got from the dungeon. After successfully defeating the beast, Hayato looked forward to Itsuki's contribution. They ended the call, and Itsuki thought about how convenient guild cards were, like smartphones. Now it was time for him to get back to work. Itsuki returned to making more accessories to sell, focusing on his craft. Meanwhile, Sorte and Aina worked hard on their hunting tasks. Aina thought they had gathered enough materials, so she suggested they go back. Sorte, who had relieved her stress through hunting, agreed and was ready to return. As they stopped by a pond to freshen up, Anna hoped the materials they collected would be enough for Itsuki's needs for now. Sorta, however, felt resentment towards Itsuki for using them, the Red Front girls, in this way. She thought about taking a significant loan to buy their freedom, expressing her desire for independence despite being in a situation where she was Itsuki's slave. Despite this, Aina wasn't overly disheartened. Sorta encouraged her not to be too forgiving. Sorte couldn't accept Itsuki casually entering their lives as if everything were normal. She had a belief that men attracted to women with large melons were inherently untrustworthy, and she viewed them with suspicion. They soon reached the Alchemy Guild, where Reinrich was trying to force Itsuki to drink something he didn't want to. The girls then held Itsuki with all their might. Itsuki thought about pretending to drink it and then spitting it out later. However, when he took a sip, Reinrich punched his stomach, healing him and making him swallow it. Overwhelmed by the drink, Itsuki fainted. After a while, he woke up, finding his head on something very soft, Sorta's thighs. Startled, Itsuki asked anxiously about Aina. His body ached and he felt hungry. Luckily, Aina soon arrived with some food. After eating to his heart's content, Itsuki started to feel better. But after consuming the dangerous drug, Itsuki created many accessories, though he couldn't remember the process. According to Reinrich, he had already created accessories worth about 40 million nar. With only 5 days left and a goal of an additional 36 million nar, he still had a lot of work ahead. Despite using up all his materials, Itsuki desperately tried to figure out how to make the remaining money. He clutched the last remaining ore in his hand and noticed it vibrating. This sparked an idea. Though challenging, he wasted no time in working on it. Throughout this effort, Itsuki created various items based on mental images, discarding some and facing failures with others. However, he persisted, drawing upon all his wisdom and knowledge. In the end, he completed a device that promised intense pleasure. He had put his heart and soul into its production, and now it was finally finished. Bro just made something inappropriate. Sorte was confused, so he asked Itsuki what it was. Itsuki realized that explaining it in words was tricky. She suggested to Sorte that it could be a message tool or something similar. Remembering Aina's complaint about shoulder pain from wearing armor, she recommended Aina try it. Itsuki took the rotor and used it on Aina's shoulders. Aina was surprised at how good it felt. Her whole body went numb, and she could feel the vibrations all over. Aina asked Sorte if he wanted to use it, but then she turned to Itsuki, questioning the proper way to use it. Itsuki realized he had to come clean, so he approached her and quietly explained the true purpose of the tool in her ear. Sorta was left astounded and rendered speechless. She turned away slowly and selected a sphere, questioning Aina about the possibility of ending his life instantly. Aina responded by asking what Itsuki had done initially. Sorta inquired if there was an issue with the tool she had been pestering about, and Itsuki informed Aina that he intended to step outside for a while. Itsuki decided to leave the area, contemplating a visit to a nearby shop to make a substantial profit. He believed that selling the item would provide him with the means to free Wendy. While wandering about, he encountered 3 individuals who began to hassle him, issuing threats and demanding money. Itsuki deduced that they had been hired by Dataril. They denied any knowledge of a person named Darl, leaving Itsuki with no choice but to stand up and grab his rotor. Swiftly, he made a run for it, attempting to put distance between himself and his aggressors. To divert their attention, he pretended there was a gold coin lying on the ground, but the individuals dismissed it as a cheap trick. However, Itsuki quickly activated his pocket money skill and scattered a coin into the air, successfully diverting their attention momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, he made his escape. However, one of the assailants threw a knife in his direction, aiming to strike him. At the last possible moment, Shiro, the catgirl slave he met before, came to his rescue, saving him from imminent danger. Itsuki remembered the day he first entered the world and met her and Yasus. Later, the group of assailants questioned Shiro about her role in their tasks. She explained that she was there to protect her master, Itsuki. Shiro warned that anyone trying to harm him would face serious consequences. During the confrontation, one of them tried to attack her. In a quick move, Shiro dodged the attack and drew her sword, ready to strike back. Itsuki stepped in, urging her not to kill them. Instead, she used the back of her sword to knock down the first attacker and swiftly took care of the remaining 3 with a series of kicks. Itsuki was impressed by Shiro's help and thanked her. In response, Shiro revealed that Yasus had sent her to safeguard Itsuki. Eager to meet Yasus, Itsuki asked Shiro to take him to her right away. However, for Shiro, Itsuki was her master. She explained that she hadn't visited his house yet. Itsuki clarified that he meant Yasus, not himself. Shiro then asked if Itsuki intended to buy her or something similar. Itsuki reassured her that at least for the time being he couldn't buy her. Shiro seemed disappointed upon hearing this. Subsequently, Itsuki expressed his desire to have a brief conversation with her. Shiro immediately began heading toward Yasus's residence. Itsuki, realizing he couldn't keep up with her pace, asked her to wait as he wouldn't be able to catch up quickly. Shiro paused and allowed him to catch his breath. Itsuki gently took Shiro's hand and she led him to Yasu's location. Upon their arrival, Itsuki expressed his gratitude to Yasus for sending Shiro to assist him. Shiro, who rested on his lap, seemed to really like him. Yasus pointed out Shiro's affection, and Itsuki insisted that Shiro was just being friendly. Itsuki then mentioned he had something he wanted Yasus to check out. He got the device and showed it to Yasus, explaining what it was for. Yasus asked about Itsuki's plans for the item, and Itsuki said he wanted to sell it. Curious about the price, Yasus asked how much Itsuki was looking for. Itsuki said he wanted at least 4 million for it. Yasus thought that was too high, suggesting it might be worth a maximum of 1 million. However, Itsuki clarified that he meant the rights associated with it, not the physical tool. Yasus asked if Itsuki intended to sell the retailing rights to him, and Itsuki confirmed this, recognizing the allure of the item and Yasus's influence in stores. Yasus advised Itsuki not to get too excited and asked for specific details about the contract. Itsuki then outlined his proposal, offering Yasus the rights to the rotor for 40 million, but stating that he would handle the mass production. Itsuki left the selling price to be determined by Yasus, with the condition that Yasus would pay Itsuki 50,000 nar for every piece sold. Itsuki once asked Yasus about his thoughts on the offer. Yasus replied that he understood the terms but was worried about not getting back his initial investment. He explained that committing to 40 million indefinitely was a concern. Yasus acknowledged the potential of the product but remained uneasy about Itsuki's ability to meet the high demand for mass production. Itsuki tried to convince him by assuring him that they could regularly restock with Aina and others securing the necessary materials. Yasus raised more concerns, mentioning that, as a drifter without a home in the town, Itsuki might leave any time. Understanding Yasus's worries, Itsuki made a surprising proposal, offering to use his body as a security deposit, essentially becoming Yasus's. Yasus chuckled and found Itsuki's proposition amusing. However, when Itsuki insisted on finalizing a slavery contract, Yasus suggested holding off on that for now. He explained there was no need to formalize a slavery contract at this time. Instead, he proposed that Itsuki first give him permanent ownership of the pink rotor. Yasus cautioned Itsuki that any betrayal would be unforgivable, and he would hold a grudge. Shifting the talk to the 40 million nar matter, Yasus was ready to discuss it. However, Itsuki urgently mentioned he had to leave soon. Before parting, he asked Yasus if he could bring Shiro with him after making 10 rotors. As they walked towards the Alchemy Guild, it was already morning and Itsuki felt tired. Shiro was visibly exhausted and asked how much further they had to go. Itsuki reassured her that they were almost there and would arrive soon. He acknowledged that it had been unreasonable for her to accompany him. Meanwhile, Dadarel scolded his men for failing to capture a single person. He made it clear that they wouldn't get paid unless they caught their target. The three goons felt embarrassed, and a butler intervened, advising Dadarel not to attempt flashy sabotages, as offending Yasis could have negative consequences. Dadarel believed he would lose the bet unless he performed a trick. His infatuation with Wendy drove him to do anything to win her over. Wendy anxiously wondered who would be her master. The next day, in front of the Alchemist Guild, Dadarel wondered if Itsuki would declare his surrender, considering he had been called out days before the deadline. Dadarel got really mad when Itsuki called him in that way. He felt like Itsuki was being too bold, and it made him realize there was a big difference in power between them. Dadarel thought he had given up and lost. Itsuki teased him by calling him a pig and told him to keep making funny sounds. This made Dadarel and Itsuki argue a lot. Then, out of nowhere, the person judging the contest showed up and said the deadline wasn't over, but they already had a winner. Dadarel was shocked to find out that Itsuki had collected 80 million and won. Yasis officially said Itsuki was the clear winner, ending the match. Dadarel didn't want to believe it and said Reinrich must have helped Itsuki with money and support. In response, Reinrich showed a document with records of payments from different groups that bought Itsuki's things, adding up to 40 million nar. Dadarel was surprised by this information and asked about the other 40 million nar. Suddenly, Yasis called over someone and a guy came in carrying a box with the pink rotor. Dadarel asked about its use and Reinrich revealed that it had the royal seal of the king. Yasis explained that the product was developed by Itsuki and its rights were sold to him for 40 million air. However, Dadarel remained skeptical, arguing that if it had royal approval, it could have been sold for a much higher sum. Even Itsuki was surprised to learn that Yasis had secured the king's approval. Yasis clarified that it was an offer Dadarel couldn't refuse. Dadarel erupted and shouted, refusing to acknowledge the result. But at that moment, Wendy herself arrived and implored Dadarel to accept the decided outcome. Wendy asserted that both her body and soul now belonged to Itsuki, and she would never submit to anyone else. Dadarel's frustration escalated and his men brandished weapons, causing damage to Reinrich's room, which infuriated her. Aina reassured Reinrich that she could leave the situation to them. Itsuki promised Wendy that Aina and the dog girl would protect her at all costs. Sorta was somewhat irked by Itsuki's constant use of that term. Shiro joined the fray to aid in the rescue effort, and the trio engaged in combat against Dadarel's men. While Itsuki was safeguarding Wendy, he felt a bit scared when he realized that he didn't have the skills and strength to fight like the others. However, he was determined to protect Wendy from any harm. From the moment they met, he expressed his desire to be by her side. Touched by his words, Wendy teared up. Dadarel became increasingly upset as they struggled against a group that included women, children, and the elderly. They couldn't subdue them, and suddenly the fighting stopped. Everyone turned their attention to Darwin, the supervisor of the West District, who hadn't expected such a fierce battle in this location. Darwin, who turned out to be Dadarel's father, received a report from Reinrich that his impulsive son had started the conflict. Itsuki was astonished to discover that his own father held such significant influence. Accompanying Dadarel's father was a small woman who looked at Itsuki with a calm and gentle smile. Dadarel looked afraid when he saw his father. Darwin came over and scolded him for what he did, telling him not to call him father anymore. Itsuki felt a big difference in Darwin's vibe compared to Yasis and Reinrich. Darwin seemed intimidating. Darwin thought Dadarel and Itsuki had fought over a woman, but Dadarel defended himself by saying Itsuki cheated. However, Darwin, with a cold look, said a win is a win, no matter how it happens. He then turned to Itsuki and asked if he was the handsome man who beat Dadarel. Shiro, protective of Itsuki, warned Darwin of serious consequences if he came closer. Darwin, not bothered, said he had skilled pawns. He told Itsuki to make Shiro put her weapon away. Itsuki passed the message and Shiro complied but stayed alert, saying any suspicious move would be met with swift action. In a tense atmosphere, everyone took their seats and began discussing. Darwin shared that he understood the situation to some extent. Dadarel, who was bound, faced his father's questions about why he refused to admit defeat after losing. Dadarel pleaded with his father not to believe what others were saying. Darwin called him a fool and advised him not to make excuses, stating that maybe they weren't really blood-related. Darwin even hinted that serious consequences were deserved. He reminded Dadarel of his constant advice to give his best effort and gracefully accept failure. Dadarel's stepdaughter, Mayra, mentioned hearing this advice many times. Darwin pointed out two mistakes Dadarel made, accusing others even after the battle ended and continuing to fight with the Alchemy Guild. Darwin informed Dadarel about a strict policy of non-hostility toward the Slave Trading Association and the Alchemist Guild, which Dadarel had violated. Now he had to face some form of penalty. Darwin asked Itsuki for input on what to do about Dadarel, but Itsuki preferred not to get involved in the father-son matter. Yasus told Darwin that he wanted compensation for the emotional distress he went through because of the violence. He also said he needed a break to recover physically and mentally. Darwin asked him how much money he wanted for compensation. Yasus said he would talk to his wife about it and send an invoice later. Itsuki was surprised to hear that Yasus was going through mental distress, especially since he had a wife. Then Darwin turned to Reinrich and asked her about her desires. At first, Reinrich asked him to fix the wall that her son had torn down, but unexpectedly she expressed her wish to have his bank. Darwin was shocked by this request, and Itsuki had expected that she might ask for something extravagant. Darwin voiced his concern, saying that giving her the bank would be too much. He asked her to suggest an alternative. Reinrich suggested that she should be able to meddle with the loans. However, she warned Darwin that if he didn't agree to her terms, she would go to the church and report his son's wrongdoings and shady dealings. Itsuki was curious about the deal they were discussing, and Mira asked Reinrich if it involved illegal drug trafficking for the pharmaceutical guild. Darwin, hearing about this for the first time, looked at Dadarl and told him that even if he escaped punishment this time, he would eventually be caught. Darwin expressed that Dadarl had caused him a lot of unnecessary trouble and severely criticized him. He warned Dadarl that the church would give him a very strict punishment from which he couldn't escape. Darwin instructed his group to safely accompany Dadarl back home, advising that if Dadarl tried to run away or harm himself, they should help him learn a valuable lesson. Itsuki became more worried about Darwin's well-being. Later, Darwin asked Itsuki how he could help him. Itsuki just wanted to leave that place and assured Darwin that it would be enough. Shiro stood closely behind Darwin and warned him not to try to frighten her master again. Darwin looked at Shiro and told Itsuki that he had excellent subordinates. For a brief moment, he mulled over about claiming them as his own. Itsuki responded by saying that Shiro's loyalty was unwavering. Darwin then made an offer, suggesting to send Wendy to Itsuki's location with the assurance that no harm would come to her. This proposition sparked a fiery reaction from Itsuki, who argued that Darwin was no different from his own son. Itsuki insisted that Wendy now solely belonged to him, and strongly opposed anyone else taking her. Darwin praised Itsuki's determination, and remarked that individuals with such resolve often had short lifespans. Itsuki, displaying unwavering confidence, stated that he entered this world for the sole purpose of enjoying life and seeking peace. He firmly declared that he would not leave until he achieved this goal. Darwin realized that Itsuki was indeed a drifter. Itsuki then requested that Darwin only punish him and refrain from entering their lives again, as that was all he desired. Reinrich responded to Itsuki, emphasizing that acceptance or rejection was no longer the issue. He explained that an apology only held meaning if the person offering it did so with genuine conviction, allowing them to move forward without lingering resentment. In response, Darwin, wanting to make Itsuki happy, asked again if there was anything he could do. He even went as far as offering Itsuki's daughter Mira for marriage. Intrigued, Mira questioned whether Itsuki would meet her standards as a suitable partner. However, Itsuki firmly refused Mira's offer, explaining that he couldn't fulfill her desires because his main goal was to live a stress-free life. Feeling unsure, Itsuki turned to Reinrich for advice. Reinrich told him not to overthink it, and encouraged him to express his thoughts freely. Itsuki thought about what he truly wanted, and then secretly shared his thoughts with Darwin, who soon left. With the tension diffused, everyone relaxed and enjoyed a calming cup of tea. Reinrich commented to Itsuki that he always seemed to attract trouble, but Itsuki was happy that he had resolved everything peacefully. They also noticed that Reinrich had received several items from Darwin without any charge. Reinrich felt that providing these benefits was the least he could do to make up for his foolish son's actions. Suddenly, Aina entered the scene and informed Itsuki that a messenger from Darwin had arrived, bringing the items he had requested. Itsuki told Reinrich that he would return shortly to inspect the goods. Reinrich then suggested that Itsuki should come back after he had calmed down because she had some tasks to do. Later, Sorta mentioned that normally one would have to work to earn the money for the things they were about to receive. They engaged in a brief argument, but Aina eventually expressed her satisfaction with Itsuki's choices. Itsuki consulted a map and figured out that, according to his information, the materials he sought should be located in the vicinity. He finally arrived at the specified location and came across a huge, beautiful mansion. Thanks to Darwin, it was now his property. Itsuki felt a bit nervous as he walked in, finding it hard to believe that he now owned a house in a completely new world. Even in his previous life, he had never had a place of his own. As he opened the door, he was surprised to find Wendy already inside. She warmly welcomed Itsuki and invited him in. Curious, Itsuki asked her why she was there. Wendy explained that it was her duty to prepare before her master arrived. Itsuki felt overjoyed hearing Wendy refer to him as master. Shortly after Darwin inquired if Itsuki was satisfied with his new house, Itsuki sought reassurance, asking if he indeed possessed the entire house. Darwin assured him that he always kept his promises, and that the house had everything Itsuki might require. from an alchemy room to a basement bath. Darwin held a deep affection for the house and felt a hint of sadness about parting with it. Itsuki expressed gratitude and shook hands with Darwin. With the matter concerning Dill resolved, Itsuki felt a sense of closure regarding the house. As Darwin bid farewell, he mentioned that Yasis would also be visiting the house soon. The next day, Wendy invited Itsuki for tea with a charming smile, and he couldn't resist. Itsuki then told Aina and Sorte they could use the rooms as they liked. He assured them he'd take care of their stay. Sorte was surprised by his sudden kindness and asked what caused the change. Itsuki teasingly asked if she preferred sleeping outdoors, so Sorte had to accept the offer. Everyone went to their respective rooms. Sorte happily settled into her bed, noting how much more comfortable it was than the local inns. Aina mentioned a bath, exciting Sorte. She told Sorte that Itsuki might already be using it, but Sorte grabbed her hand, leading her to the bath. It had been a while since they enjoyed a proper bath, and the anticipation was high. Meanwhile, Itsuki was thoroughly enjoying his bath, savoring the pleasure after a long time. As he soaked, memories surfaced of how he used to pay for spa visits in his previous life, where bathing was a regular habit. To make the experience even more perfect, he found himself craving some tofu to go with the hot bath. Additionally, he thought about making a refrigerator using his alchemical skills. He thought it could be more profitable than the pink rotor. However, as Itsuki turned around, he was surprised to find Wendy there, her towel barely covering her. Itsuki was surprised and asked Wendy why she was there. Wendy calmly said she wanted to wash his back. Although feeling a bit awkward, Itsuki couldn't refuse her offer. Wendy reassured him that he could call on her whenever he needed her in the bath. Itsuki, on the other hand, just hoped for things not to get awkward. But the way Wendy was touching him and getting closer made it tough. Then, Wendy told Itsuki that she would now wash the front part and asked him to turn and face her. Feeling helpless, Itsuki understood that it might not end well for him if he turned around. Wendy slid her hands under Itsuki's arms and expressed gratitude for all his help, mentioning how glad she was to be his property. They were inching closer, on the verge of sharing a kiss. But their private, intimate moment was suddenly interrupted when the door burst open, and Sorte and Aina walked in. Sorte was there to let Itsuki know it was their turn to use the bath. However, she got really upset when she saw Itsuki and Wendy facing each other. She started yelling at Itsuki, calling him mean names like a troublemaker. Itsuki tried to explain it was a misunderstanding, but he noticed Aina also seemed disappointed. Sorte left angrily, and Itsuki tried to explain that Wendy was only helping him wash his back, nothing more. Sorte asked about the meaning of it, doubting whether Itsuki planned to do similar things in the future. Then Aina, dressed in a towel, appeared and apologized for not being there while her master was bathing. She told Sorte that as slaves, it was their duty to assist their master at all times. Wendy agreed with Aina, and Aina also apologized to Wendy, recognizing that she had to handle everything on her own earlier. Sorte tried to kick Itsuki out of the bath, but he insisted on staying in his own bath. Aina attempted to explain to Sorte that she was dedicated to her duties, but in the midst of it, she slipped and fell. Her towel came off, revealing her slightly chubby body to everyone. Sword then unexpectedly punched Itsuki to catch him off guard. As Itsuki was knocked, he could only wonder what had disrupted his peaceful bath. Meanwhile, at Darwin's residence, Mira chatted with Dharma, another of Darwin's adopted children. Dharma apologized for not being around when Didarl tarnished their family's reputation. Mira assured him that it wasn't his fault. Dharma expressed his interest in meeting Itsuki, who played a significant role in the incident. Mira mentioned that Itsuki seemed to be enjoying himself while Darwin handled business affairs. This increased Dharma's eagerness to meet Itsuki in the future. The next morning, Shiro noticed Itsuki mumbling in his sleep. Approaching him, she sat down beside him and eventually drifted off to sleep herself. When Itsuki woke up, he found Shiro still resting on his bed. Wendy arrived and happily greeted Itsuki, letting him know that breakfast was ready. Seeing Shiro there, Wendy asked about it. Itsuki explained that he found her on his bed when he woke up. Wendy assured Itsuki she would wake Shiro soon, but Itsuki requested that Shiro be allowed to rest as long as she wanted. The closeness between them made the situation awkward. They went to the dining hall where the breakfast was getting cold, but looked incredibly delicious. Without delay, they started eating. Wendy served everyone, and Sorte asked if she had prepared all the food herself. Wendy happily confirmed this, making Sorte feel a bit jealous of her perfection. Even though the food was undeniably delicious, Sorte couldn't help but notice that the way Itsuki and Shiro were eating seemed rather uncivilized, almost like barbarians. Wendy brought them some tea. Itsuki thanked Wendy for making a delicious meal, and she smiled, saying it's always worth it when she receives such compliments. Itsuki couldn't contain his excitement, knowing he would get to enjoy such tasty food every day. Sorta playfully remarked to Itsuki that it seemed like Wendy was the true master of the house, not him. This comment provoked Itsuki to passionately assert that Wendy was indeed the true master of the house because she provided them with nourishing and delicious food, essential for their well-being. After the meal, Shiro offered to help Wendy with the dishes while keeping a close eye on her. Wendy, noticing Shiro's gaze, asked about it. Shiro responded, mentioning that Wendy seemed to have changed a bit, but her cooking was even better than what she used to prepare at his place. Wendy blushed and remained silent, not offering any response. Itsuki had gathered everyone's attention, and in a shy way he expressed his gratitude for all the help they had provided. He had personally crafted some jewelry for each of them. Aina, noticing Itsuki's intense blushing, couldn't help but ask him why he was blushing so deeply. He admitted that it was a little embarrassing for him to make a face-to-face presentation like this for the first time. They all gladly accepted the jewelry. Sorte prepared herself for another quest, and Itsuki asked them to stay a bit longer if possible. However, they turned down his offer, explaining that they planned to settle the debt on their next quest. Sorte also mentioned that once the debt was cleared, she would finally transition from being a dog girl to a wolf girl. Itsuki said his goodbyes, warning them to be careful on their journey. Sorta was eager to set off and couldn't wait to leave. Aina chuckled at Sorta's comical remark, but Sorta scolded her, saying it wasn't the right time for laughter. She expressed concern that if she found them both as slaves again, they couldn't predict her reaction. Aina asked if Sorte was worried about Itsuki, but Sorte didn't respond, choosing instead to focus on her determination to complete the quest. Meanwhile, during that afternoon in Yasus's presence, Itsuki entered into a contract with Shiro and Wendy. Itsuki apologized to Yasus for persuading him to come, and Yasus expressed gratitude for Itsuki purchasing Wendy and Shiro. Yasus also apologized for requesting such a huge amount to include Shiro. Yasus assured Itsuki that Shiro would be very helpful. Itsuki in return promised to turn to Yasus if any problems came up. After Yasus left, Wendy came over to Itsuki and said it was time for dinner. Meanwhile, Shiro approached and settled down for a nap on Itsuki's thighs. Wendy wondered why Shiro was sitting like that. Itsuki explained that he was thinking about cultivating a field in the large garden. Wendy asked if Itsuki had experience working in fields before. Itsuki replied that he hadn't but was eager to try. He had many ideas about growing different crops and envisioned a happy life with Wendy and Shiro. When Shiro woke up, she asked Itsuki what they were talking about. Itsuki said they were discussing the three of them living happily together. Shiro expressed her contentment, saying she would be delighted to be with her master. Now the three truly looked like a family. Finally, Dharma and Meira reached the Itsuki's place and introduced themselves. Itsuki couldn't help but wonder why they were there, especially since the previous matter had already been sorted out. Dharma apologized to Itsuki, admitting that their sudden appearance was unexpected and without prior notice. However, Itsuki found Dharma's constant eerie smile irritating as he served them tea. Dharma explained that he was responsible for construction and design work, having worked under his adopted father. Before Itsuki could introduce himself, Dharma preemptively shared everything about Itsuki, mentioning that he had heard a lot about him from Darwin and Meira. Dharma's demeanor resembled that of a carefree salesman. Itsuki's expression turned more serious, and he directly asked about Dharma's purpose in being there. Dharma responded that he had come to express his gratitude and offer apologies. Itsuki felt confused when Dharma made a statement. Dharma explained that it was about the Dotterel case, which had caused a lot of trouble for them. Dharma genuinely felt sorry for the problems it had caused. Itsuki reassured Dharma that he no longer had any issues with the matter because his father had already resolved it. Curiously, Itsuki asked what happened to Dotterel afterward, but in a somewhat creepy manner. Dharma asked Itsuki if he really wanted to hear the details. Itsuki changed his mind and quickly told Dharma that he didn't want to hear any more about it. Itsuki was surprised that despite being raised together in the same household, they had all turned out to be very different from one another. Itsuki reassured Dharma that the matter had been resolved and there was no need for further apologies. However, Dharma couldn't understand Itsuki's response and kept repeating his statements like a fanboy. Meira stepped in and told Itsuki that Dharma was attracted to people of the same gender. Dharma clarified that he was actually attracted to people who were better than him, with his first choice being his father. It was revealed that Itsuki was third on his list. Itsuki was shocked to hear this revelation. He couldn't help but feel disappointed that Dharma was gay despite being so handsome. Meira scolded Dharma for getting close to Itsuki. Dharma told Itsuki that he wouldn't force anyone to love him and that one day Itsuki would come to understand. Itsuki firmly replied that such a day would never come. Dharma then asked Itsuki the same question that Darwin had earlier, whether he liked the house. Itsuki gave the same response, saying that he liked the house and Dharma didn't need to worry about it. Meira asked if Itsuki liked the bathhouse. Itsuki replied that he did, but wondered why she was so interested in the bathhouse. Amira revealed that she had designed it herself, and Meira explained that she had put in a lot of effort to make the bathhouse enjoyable for her future life. Itsuki wasn't quite sure what to say, but he knew that Japanese people were known for being particular about their baths. Meira then told Itsuki that he could reach out to them whenever he needed guidance. When Itsuki went out in the city, Meira would guide him to places where drifters could enjoy themselves. Itsuki admired Mira's elegance but wondered about her upbringing by someone like Darwin. After their conversation, they said their goodbyes and Shiro, feeling hungry, mentioned that Wendy had grilled meat earlier. After a satisfying meal, both Shiro and Itsuki felt pleasantly tired. Wendy then informed Itsuki that she had prepared a bath for him, and she would join him after he finished. Shiro also wanted to join, so the three of them ended up in the bath together. While Itsuki washed Shiro's hair, she was so excited that she started hopping for joy. Itsuki warned her about the slippery floor, but her enthusiasm led her to jump straight into the pool. Itsuki couldn't help but wonder how Shiro was okay with taking a bath, considering she was a cat. Soon after, Wendy joined them in the bath without any clothes on. An uncomfortable silence filled the air for a while. Shiro was the first to leave the pool. Then Wendy asked Itsuki if she could come to his room that night. Itsuki had little choice but to agree, so that night she went to his room. As they talked about food, Itsuki found himself remembering his first date in the real world. Wendy gently took his hand, reassuring him that he didn't need to worry so much when doing something with her. In a vulnerable moment, Itsuki admitted that he loved her and asked if she felt the same way. Blushing, Wendy confirmed her feelings for him, saying he was better than any other master she had. She hugged him and asked him to make her his own, even though she was a contracted slave. Itsuki got on top and they were about to share a moment when Shiro entered the room, mistaking the room for the toilet. She caught Wendy and Itsuki in an intimate moment and asked Wendy what she was attempting to do with Itsuki. Itsuki panicked and quickly tried to provide an excuse, claiming that he was simply taking care of Wendy because she had fallen ill. Fortunately, Shiro was too tired and believed her master. Itsuki then took Shiro to the bathroom, leaving Wendy alone on the bed. The next morning, a sleep-deprived Itsuki was outside, enjoying the warmth of the sunlight. Shiro approached him and relayed Wendy's message, saying she was calling him for breakfast. During breakfast, Shiro informed Itsuki that she would be heading to Rheinrich for a while. Afterward, Itsuki went about his work for the day. However, before leaving, he made a promise to Wendy that he would make it up to her properly next time. Itsuki traveled to Rheinrich and promptly immersed himself in his work, crafting potions. Rheinrich was genuinely impressed with the marked improvement in the quality of his potions, now reaching the caliber of higher-level potions. During their conversation, Rheinrich asked Itsuki if he ever got tired of being surrounded by so many attractive companions. In response, Itsuki recounted the events of the previous night, including Sorta's interruption when things were getting intimate with Wendy. Rheinrich got really mad when he heard this. He called Itsuki a big disappointment and said he couldn't think of himself as a man if he didn't take advantage of the opportunity when the girl was ready for it. Then she told him that she needed to give him some education. Rich gave him alcohol to drink, but Itsuki asked if he should really drink it when it was still daytime. Rheinrich asked if he'd like tea or something else instead. So, Itsuki drank it, and now we see a drunk Itsuki asking Rheinrich if Wendy truly meant it when she expressed her affection for him, or if she just said it because he's her subordinate. Rheinrich told him that women are generally good at deception, but when it comes to matters of the heart, it's hard for them to hide their emotions. Itsuki wondered if she had experienced similar situations herself. Rheinrich got angry and told him to be quiet. After hearing all of this from her, Itsuki was now ready to fully engage with Wendy that day. He drank heavily in excitement and dropped dead drunk. Rheinrich simply smoked a pipe, thinking about what would become of him once he regained his senses. Itsuki went home and was offered some tea because he had dark circles under his eyes, and the tea would help him feel more alert. Shiro asked if he had done something wrong, noticing Wendy's intense anger. Itsuki understood the reason for her anger. He had promised her he would stay the night, but now he was returning early in the morning, so it was natural for her to be upset. Shiro had asked Itsuki about his plans for the day. Itsuki replied that he didn't have anything specific in mind. Shiro suggested playing together, but Itsuki said he was thinking about helping Wendy with her work. Wendy responded in a surprisingly dark and somber tone, assuring Itsuki that he didn't need to worry because she could manage on her own. Itsuki sensed something was wrong. Wendy seemed genuinely sad. She had waited for him all night, and he hadn't shown up. Itsuki spent a good amount of time sitting under a tree thinking about how to regain Wendy's trust. This situation reminded him of a similar experience in his previous world, where his job prevented him from spending enough time with his girlfriend, leading to significant tension between them. Despite his efforts to persuade her to stay, the tension ultimately led to their breakup. Itsuki decided to apologize to Wendy regardless of the outcome. However, Wendy took the initiative and went up to Itsuki, asking if she could sit next to him. Itsuki readily agreed, and for a while they just sat in silence. Then Wendy was the first to say sorry for her rude behavior. Itsuki, in response, stood up, bowed before her, and apologized for not keeping his promise. They both forgave each other, especially when Wendy revealed that she had waited for him all night. Wendy asked him to promise that he would make it up to her properly next time. Itsuki felt immense relief that Wendy had forgiven him. Shiro arrived and told them she was quite hungry. Wendy assured Shiro that she would prepare lunch shortly. After a satisfying meal, Itsuki asked Shiro to spend some time with him after lunch. Shiro asked what Itsuki needed help with. He explained that he had been protected since he arrived in this world, making him wonder if he could learn to protect himself. That's why he came up with a way to safeguard himself. He initiated a portal in his hand and inserted a hammer into it, causing the portal to consume the hammer completely. Impressed by this, Wendy asked if this ability was unique. Itsuki then explained that it was a form of space magic. He recounted how upon arriving, he had the idea to possess an item box, which he obtained from the goddess. However, since Hayato had given him a magic bag with similar capabilities, he hadn't used it until recently. One day, as his level increased, he decided to test the spatial magic. Activating it caused an invisible barrier to materialize around him. When he attempted to touch Itsuki, the barrier prevented her from making contact. Aina made it transparent, but it still prevented physical contact with anyone. Itsuki became curious about whether the barrier could withstand attacks, so he instructed Shiro to launch a full-force attack against him. Initially, Shiro issued a warning, but then she put her heart into a powerful strike. However, the barrier successfully blocked the entire attack, leaving Itsuki unscathed. Encouraged by Itsuki, Shiro launched a series of consecutive strikes with all her might. This time, the barrier eventually shattered. Itsuki pondered whether it was less durable than he hoped, and whether it could withstand magical attacks. Wendy offered to help, mentioning she knew a spell that could assist. Itsuki agreed, and together they created a new barrier using her magic. Wendy shot a high-speed water bullet at Itsuki, but luckily he didn't suffer severe injuries. The barrier, although not perfect, provided him a way to protect himself in emergencies. When the girls approached him and asked about his well-being, Itsuki stood up and suggested going out into the town at night. Shiro was thrilled to hear this, and Itsuki expressed gratitude for their help that day. Meanwhile, Aina and Sorte were busy hunting monsters nearby. Aina prepared food for them, but when they tasted it, it was clear from their reactions that it was a bit bland. Sorte reassured Aina, saying it was at least better than last time. Although Aina felt disheartened, Sorte tried to lift her spirits, emphasizing that it didn't have to be perfect, just palatable. Aina expressed her fear that as a woman she wouldn't be able to satisfy Itsuki, genuinely wanting to be helpful to him. On the opposite side of the second wall, there was a girl named Renge. She asked the guards to let her pass, explaining that she had an important job in the town. Unfortunately, the soldiers told her they were following orders from the border fort and couldn't allow her through. Renge looked upset and told the guards she had no money left. She tried to communicate the urgency several times, but the guards stubbornly refused to let her in. Frustrated, Renge took action. She leaped forward and kicked one of the guards in the face, trying to break through the barrier. The guards gave chase as Renge hurriedly sought to reunite with Sorte and Aina. Meanwhile, Itsuki and Wendy were at the market. Itsuki noticed someone dressed like a walking vegetable. Wendy, curious, remarked that it seemed to be a moi, wondering if it had escaped from a shop somewhere. Itsuki confirmed that in his world, vegetables definitely couldn't walk. Shiro, feeling extremely hungry, couldn't wait and devoured the entire moi. Itsuki then asked her what she wanted to eat. Shiro's craving for meat was clear as her eyes sparkled at the thought. Itsuki, turning to Wendy, asked if she knew of a good meat restaurant. Wendy assured him that he could trust her to find one. Not long after, they reached a nice restaurant and started enjoying their favorite meals. While Ring dealt with the guards, Shiro, having eaten her fill, still wanted more. Trying to avoid the guards, Renge leaped into the air and awkwardly landed on Itsuki. She quickly grabbed Itsuki, pretending her hands were a sword, warning the guards quietly. In a hushed tone, she asked for Itsuki's help to reach their friends. Growing worried, Shiro stayed alert, ready to protect Itsuki if needed. Itsuki told Shiro to make sure Wendy got home safely. Then, he carefully told Renge to guide him to the alley on the right. Renge followed and led him to the specified spot. Using his magical abilities, Itsuki created a barrier, blocking the guards and solving part of the problem. However, Shiro, at Wendy's request, returned to protect Itsuki once again. Itsuki and Renge entered a brothel, where Itsuki assured her that they would be safe because the owner, Yasis, knew him personally. Renge expressed her discomfort about being there and questioned Itsuki about his intentions. He explained that he brought her there to avoid the guards, and as people in the establishment began discussing Renge, they apprehended her. She informed Itsuki that she used to be an adventurer affiliated with the Red Front, and shared that Sorte and Aina from the Red Front were her close friends. Renge revealed that Sorte had sent her a recent letter describing being enslaved by a perverted man. She showed Itsuki the letter, which somewhat portrayed him negatively, exaggerating certain events. Upon reading it, Itsuki became extremely angry. Renge reassured him that she would do whatever it took to rescue them from the pervert master. Itsuki then asked her to stay calm and listen. Confused, Renge asked him to explain. Itsuki revealed that he was the person described in the letter. Renge thought that Itsuki was joking, but she overheard a passerby recognizing Itsuki as the Red Front girl's master. Unable to control her anger, Renge impulsively punched him. A flashback to what happened at the Adventure Guild a few months before Itsuki's arrival. Renge received a nomination, a common occurrence for her. Assuring Aina she promised to quickly complete her mission. However, her friends were genuinely concerned, knowing Renga's tendency to be reckless. She headed to Roku village where she chatted with local children. During these talks, she learned that an earth dragon in the area was harming the residents. One child shared that his father was injured, and his mother was tirelessly working in the nursing branch to support their family. Generously, Renga gave all her money to the child, asking him to deliver it to his father. This forged a heartfelt connection with the local kids. Despite the town's reduced population, she also made her way to the Adventurer Guild in that area. Due to the Earth Dragon's terror, an elderly man at the guild gave her all the needed details about 3 months ago. The Earth Dragon had first appeared 3 months ago, and it wasn't clear if it was a survivor from a previous encounter or a newly hatched dragon. A group of strong individuals tried to defeat it, but regular weapons couldn't penetrate its tough skin. Moreover, after attacking people, the dragons would burrow under the sand to rest before moving to the next hunting ground. At least 3 of them were known, and the last sighting was around 5 years ago. Armed with this information, she went into the desert to find the dragons. She set a clever trap to lure them out from under the sand. After 3 days of watchful waiting, the first dragon finally emerged. Renga had prepared well to capture it, marking the beginning of their intense battle. During this period, Sorta penned a letter to her. The battle raged on with tremendous intensity. The dragon's hide proved to be exceptionally resilient, and Renga faced challenges while confronting it. However, she managed to discover the dragon's vulnerable point and struck it. Ultimately, she successfully vanquished the dragon, leaving her utterly fatigued from the protracted and strenuous battle. The entire village was deeply impressed by her actions. The child to whom she had offered financial assistance expressed heartfelt gratitude. Thanks to the money, his father regained the ability to walk. The elderly man who had appointed her explained that he couldn't provide the funds immediately. However, he promised to send the money to her guild in a few days. In return, she entrusted him with the task of processing the dragon's remains. It was at this point that the old man handed her the letter sent by Sorta. After perusing the letter, Renga couldn't contain her excitement and hurriedly returned to their location. Returning to the present moment, she was on the edge of striking Itsuki. Suddenly, Shiro moved swiftly, intercepting her attack to shield Itsuki from harm. Renga raised her voice, demanding that Shiro step aside, but Shiro stood firm, refusing to give in. A crowd gathered, intrigued by the unfolding confrontation. As Renge briefly lost focus, Shiro seized the opportunity to strike from a blind spot. However, Renge quickly noticed the attempt and successfully blocked it, causing Shiro's sword to shatter. Unfazed, Shiro wasn't finished. She followed up with a powerful kick aimed at Renge's face. Renge, quick on her feet, seized Shiro's leg and forcefully hurled her aside. Shiro landed by mistake, colliding with a nearby girl, prompting her to leap back toward Renga. At that moment, Renge realized that her impulsiveness was making her an easy target. As Renga attempted to deliver a punch, Shiro executed a remarkable mid-air dodge, followed by a graceful handstand flip. In an exciting move, Shiro delivered a strong kick to the back of Renga, leading to Ring's loss in the match. Shiro was determined to pursue further, ready to deliver a potentially fatal blow. However, Itsuki intervened, informing Shiro that Renge was Sorte and Aina's companion. Renga, now standing, confidently declared herself as their true companion. She promised to do whatever it took to rescue them. Itsuki suggested to Shiro that explaining the situation was pointless at this moment. Instead, he recommended leaving and clarifying everything with Aina and Sorte. In a burst of anger, Renga resumed her attack by throwing furniture at Itsuki. He narrowly dodged the flying objects. Shiro assured Itsuki that she would keep Renga occupied while he made his escape. She promised to show restraint and avoid causing lethal harm this time. With determination, Shiro leaped forward to confront Renge. However, Renge quickly cast a spell, striking the ground with a powerful punch. Crystal needles emerged from the ground. Shiro skillfully dodged the needles with incredible agility, but unfortunately, Itsuki wasn't as lucky. Several crystal needles pierced his flesh, causing him to bleed. Worried about Itsuki's well-being, Shiro hurried to his side and inquired about his condition. At the same time, Renga came over insisting that Shiro step aside so she could handle Itsuki. The situation escalated when a group of armed soldiers arrived and surrounded Renga, including Yasis, who seemed surprised by the intense situation. Wendy also appeared, visibly concerned, and cradled Itsuki on her lap, trying to stay composed. Yasis advised Wendy to calm down, but she was close to tears. The soldiers apprehended Renga with a swift kick to the ground, but she transformed into a liquid state and leaped again, determined to harm Itsuki. Wendy positioned herself in front of him as a protective shield. Renga considered stopping upon seeing her, but Shiro quickly pushed her aside and forcefully slammed her to the ground. Yasis expressed gratitude to Shiro for her help, and emphasized the need to take Itsuki to the hospital first. When suggesting the Adventurers Guild as a destination, Yasis questioned why not a church or clinic. His curiosity stemmed from wondering about the decision. He was told that Itsuki's potions were stored there and it happened to be the closest location. The soldiers asked what to do with Renge, and Yasus told them to take her to his mansion. Itsuki was taken to the Adventurers Guild where he received bandages for his injuries. After some time, Itsuki regained consciousness. Shiro rushed to his side with tears in her eyes, embracing him tightly and apologizing repeatedly. Itsuki, confused, asked why she was apologizing. Shiro explained that she couldn't save him. Itsuki comforted her, saying that if she hadn't been there, he might not have survived. Suddenly, Itsuki got up and asked several questions about Aina, Sorte, and Renga's well-being. Aina arrived and informed him that Renge was currently at Yasus's mansion. Itsuki expressed his desire to talk to Renge about recent events, mentioning that she had already been informed by Yasus. Aina bowed and apologized for the entire incident at the Adventurers Guild. The members of the guild asked why Aina was apologizing. Aina then revealed that the person who attacked Itsuki was actually their fellow member, Renge. This shocked the members, and they wondered why Renge would do such a thing. Wendy, who was present, also questioned why a friend of Aina would take such a drastic action. They all recognized that Renge's actions could have seriously endangered Itsuki's life. Itsuki, concerned, asked about Sorte's whereabouts. However, Aina couldn't provide an answer. Meanwhile, in Yasus's mansion, Renge found herself shackled and facing punishment for various wrongdoings, including tax evasion, breaching the tower gate, engaging in a battle with castle guards, causing damage to a building in Yasus's area, and attempting to harm Itsuki. Yasus informed Renge that Itsuki was receiving treatment and getting better, which only made Renge angrier. Frustrated, Renge tried to escape, but her restraints were not ordinary chains. Magic did not affect them. They were crafted from special copper designed for capturing high-level monsters. At that moment, Sorte arrived, wearing a sorrowful expression. Upon witnessing Renge's distressing condition, Sorte requested Yasus not to be cruel to her. Yasus responded by asking her which of the two of them appeared more cruel. He informed her that one of his stores was almost destroyed, and her master was nearly killed, primarily due to her actions, even more so than Rang. He pointed out that if she hadn't sent the letter, none of this would have occurred. Overwhelmed with guilt, Sorte collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down her face, realizing her terrible mistake. She admitted that she never intended for something like this to happen. Yasus sternly reminded her that her intentions don't matter. The consequences are right in front of her. Yasus blamed Renge for different reasons, especially since Itsuki was one of his most crucial business partners. Renge interrupted and shouted at Yasus, urging him to cease his accusations. She insisted that he should talk to her since she was the one responsible for the situation, and expressed no regrets if it was necessary to save Aina and Sorte. Sorte pleaded with her to stop. Sorte then revealed that they were never actually in a dire situation from the start, leaving Ring confused. Renge asked what she was trying to say. Yasus informed her that they entered into a contractual arrangement with Itsuki for debt servitude due to the harm they had caused him. Aina and Sorte assumed responsibility for their actions and willingly accepted servitude. He informed her that their time in Itsuki's mansion had been peaceful, and as a result, the contents of Sorte's letter were inaccurate. However, he also told her she should read the entire letter before doing something unwise. There was a follow-up letter that became irrelevant. Too late for such thoughts. He pointed out her mistakes and how she caused more harm than her guilt warranted. Now, she had to face a destiny similar to what Sorte and Aina had faced. Sorte witnessed all of this when she first met Itsuki. She strongly disliked him because he often came between her and Aina, fueling her animosity. She also resented how Aina smiled at him, wanting him to leave quickly. Despite her deep dislike, Itsuki never rejected her, and she gradually got used to her bitter life with him. Feeling embarrassed for writing a foolish letter, she realized her actions put both him and Renge in danger. Overwhelmed by self-embarrassment, she collapsed and begged Yasus for forgiveness, admitting it was entirely her fault. She pleaded to spare at least Renge from the consequences. Renge advised against it, but Sorte insisted that she should be punished instead. Yasus had admired their bond, but he cautioned that the law was clear, and getting emotional wouldn't change it. He exclaimed that the law was absolute and claimed that two famous adventurers would do well as products soon. Just then, Itsuki arrived and asked Yasus to listen for a moment. Yasus asked about Itsuki's health, and Itsuki assured him that he was perfectly fine. With tears in her eyes, Sorte confessed to Itsuki that she had done things she deeply regretted and sincerely apologized. Itsuki, wearing a gentle smile, affectionately patted her head. He admitted that he believed the contents of the letter were inaccurate, but his priority now was to get her and Renge out of the ongoing trouble. He stood up and asked Yasus to remove Ring's restraints. Yasus, however, said he couldn't do that as Sorte was considered a dangerous criminal. Itsuki persistently tried to persuade him, but Yasus declared that the feudal lord would decide Sorte's fate. Itsuki agreed to take responsibility for all damages and promised to reimburse everything. He went further, pledging to pay additional apology fees. Yasus questioned why Itsuki was so determined to save a girl who had almost gotten him killed. He described Itsuki as an exceptionally compassionate person, but Yasus dismissed the idea as impossible. He maintained his stubborn stance despite Itsuki's persuasive efforts. Aina also stepped in, asking Yasis for forgiveness on behalf of Sorte and Renge. She claimed equal responsibility and was willing to accept any punishment they might face. Yasis then asked Suzuki if Aina would be willing to take on a challenging mission in their place without any delay. Aina replied that she would do it if it meant ensuring the freedom of Renge and Sorta. Yasis urged Aina not to consider such a drastic sacrifice. Itsuki attempted to clarify that it would only perpetuate the very issue they were trying to avoid. Yasis questioned Itsuki about his desire to resolve the situation without anyone suffering. Itsuki enthusiastically confirmed this, but Yasis asserted that a mere apology would not equate to justice. As a citizen of Ainshale, Yasis was bound by the city's laws and regulations. He advised Itsuki to abandon his feudal aspirations. Unbothered, Itsuki asked Yasis about his views on what makes a good merchant compared to just being a regular citizen. Yasis, curious, then asked Itsuki to explain his perspective. Itsuki, a drifter with knowledge of things foreign to their world, hoped for a wise decision from Yasis to enter into a mutually beneficial deal, leading to their shared prosperity. Itsuki suggested a significant request: a one-sided loan. He simply wanted an arrangement that could resolve their issues. To add an element of fun, Itsuki invited Yasis to play a game. When Yasis inquired about the type of game, Itsuki assured him that he would accept any condition Yasis set. Itsuki proposed a challenge where he had to complete any task Yasis presented. The condition was that if Itsuki won, Yasis should release Renge and Sorte from their predicament. However, Yasis clarified that he lacked the authority to grant such clemency in the first place. Itsuki, attempting to flatter Yasis, expressed his belief that there's nothing Yasis couldn't solve. Yasis acknowledged his capacity to handle matters to a certain extent, but warned Itsuki that meeting his demands would come with substantial risks. Yasis questioned Itsuki about the consequences if he lost the game. Boldly, Itsuki declared that in that scenario he would become Yasis's lifelong slave, leaving everyone in shock. Renge had attempted to stop the idea. She couldn't accept that the same person she had tried to harm was also the one trying to save her and her friends. Itsuki then revealed that he had been acting for the sake of Sorta and Aina. Knowing that Renge was like family to them, he couldn't stand to see her held back by misunderstandings. This revelation made Renge cry. She felt foolish for not recognizing how Itsuki had helped her before the conflict. Shiro approached her master and inquired if he was okay with this bet. Itsuki responded with a comforting smile, even seeking Shiro's thoughts on the matter. This boosted Shiro's confidence as she knew her master would always come through. Yasis found the scene amusing and Aina couldn't believe that he was now being challenged. As a merchant, he couldn't decline such a bet. Yasis informed Itsuki that he would accept the challenge. The challenge itself would mirror the one Itsuki had with Daryl. They would compete to earn 120 million nar in 1 week. This amount would also serve as the compensation Yasis wanted for his store. The crucial part was that Itsuki couldn't receive help from the Adventurer and Alchemy Guild. The earnings from the Pink Rotor and its associated rights wouldn't be counted. Itsuki confidently accepted the conditions, believing he wouldn't lose. In the meantime, he gained custody of Sorte and Renge. Later that day, the sun had been shining brightly when Itsuki and his group finally left Yasis's mansion. Itsuki felt that the night had been really long and tiring. Renge then got his attention and apologized for her actions. She understood that what she did might not be easily forgiven, but she still wanted to express her remorse. Sorte also shared her thoughts, admitting that she was the one to blame, not Renge. However, Itsuki, being kind-hearted, playfully pinched Sorte's cheeks and reassured her that everything was okay. He considered them all his precious friends. Itsuki also told Rang not to worry, as things would now be handled smoothly. Ian tried to apologize to her master, expressing regret for everything that happened. After Itsuki said that everyone should just go home for now, they arrived at the mansion. To their surprise, Itsuki and his group were greeted by an ominous aura emanating from Wendy, who was clearly furious. Itsuki had apologized to Wendy for leaving her inside the mansion, but she didn't really pay much attention. Instead, she went up to Renge and asked about her identity. When Renge confirmed who she was, Wendy struck her, perhaps seeking revenge for harming her master. After that, Wendy told everyone to wash their hands because the meal was ready. She told Renge to do the same. Then Wendy turned to Itsuki and expressed that she didn't want to be left alone anymore. She wanted to be involved in all matters her master dealt with. The short confrontation ended, and they all enjoyed a delicious meal prepared by Wendy. While they were busy eating, Itsuki reflected on the slow and steady life he had dreamt of, realizing it was still far off. A lot of things happened to Itsuki in the new world, especially the issue with Renge and the bet with Yasis. Nevertheless, he was glad that everything had gone well. There were still 7 days left until the deadline Yasis had given him. Itsuki had been using almost all of his free time to work tirelessly, creating different jewelry to sell. He remembered the challenge Yasis presented. He needed to earn 120 million nar without the help of the guilds. With his current funds, he could only account for half of the required amount. He He wondered where he could find the remaining ones. While pondering some ideas, Shiro spotted him and asked where he was going. Itsuki revealed that he was heading for a bath to refresh himself and clear his mind. Shiro found this amusing and decided to join him. As they were about to take a bath, Itsuki brought up the topic of Shiro constantly sneaking around for food. Wendy was getting stressed because of Shiro's antics. Shiro explained to Itsuki that she couldn't help herself as she was always hungry. When they entered the bathroom, Itsuki was surprised to find Sorte and Renge inside. Itsuki quickly apologized, unaware that they were already there. Sorta was about to throw something at him but managed to stop herself. She then told Itsuki not to look at her, a new and embarrassing expression for Sorta. Itsuki asked why Sorta was acting that way, making Sorta even more embarrassed. In the midst of this, Shiro went in front of Renga and asked for help washing her hair. Renga didn't expect this, and they all ended up laughing and having a good time. Their relationship was becoming more bonded. Meanwhile, Wendy and Aina were in the kitchen. Wendy had tried some new recipes and Aina tasted them. Since Wendy was always skilled at cooking, Aina praised her, calling her amazing. Aina then apologized to Wendy, admitting she wasn't as good as Wendy in attending to their master's needs. Wendy understood this feeling and shared that she could do everything, having dedicated her life to Itsuki. The only issue was that Itsuki wouldn't let her do everything, which saddened her. However, this feeling faded as she remembered when Itsuki told her he loved her. During that moment, she acknowledged that Aina could still do some things she couldn't. This statement encouraged Aina, and both Wendy and Aina decided they would do their best to assist and make Itsuki's life easier. 2 days later, Itsuki wore a certain expression on his face and his mind was already drained. He believed that even with his speed in creating jewelry, he wouldn't finish and earn the required amount for the challenge. Aina started pondering ways to overcome this hurdle, fearing the consequences if he failed. Itsuki was determined not to let that happen. Yan recalled that he could seek Darwin's help in this matter. Lost in thought, Wendy entered and surprised Itsuki with the news of a guest, Mira, Darwin's stepdaughter. Itsuki felt beads of sweat forming as he wondered why she had come to visit. He greeted her, but his nervousness was unmistakable in his voice, even though he hadn't done anything wrong since their last meeting. Myra then shared that she entered the room because she had heard about the incident involving him and Yasis. She found the situation intriguing. As they talked, Itsuki ended up sharing his struggle to earn enough money for a challenge. Myra smiled and suggested that the issue could be easily resolved if he looked inward. She referred to him as a drifter and believed he had skills that could help with the problem. Itsuki thought about his current abilities such as his pocket money and alchemy skills. However, Mira leaned in and whispered that he might have some new skills besides the ones he was aware of. Mira knew that the goddess had given him some skills to make his life easier in this world. Itsuki then brought out his status card and checked his skills. These were the current active and passive skills that Itsuki had, and it was clear that there were new skills. It took some time before our protagonist noticed the new ones. Forgery and hand molding. Itsuki stood in front of his crafting table checking on the new skills. The forgery skill allowed him to duplicate things, but the duplicated items would have a lower quality than the original. As for the hand molding skill, it allowed him to freely process materials and transform them into another form, depending on the alchemy scale. Our main character now had a clearer idea of what to do. He planned to use his hand molding skill to create a new type of material and use the forgery skill to mass produce these items. The only thing he needed to consider now was what item to make. The reminder of Mira being a drifter then came to his mind, giving him an idea for his next move. Itsuki gathered everyone for a small meeting and asked for their help. Aina, Sorte, and Renge quickly volunteered because they wanted to make up for causing trouble before. Itsuki told them to calm down, handed them a list of materials to find, and mentioned it was urgent. The three checked the list, which had many items, but they were all easy to get. Itsuki added that he needed the items as soon as possible. Our main character also had a special request. He needed one of them to uncover a revelation. This surprised Aina, Sorta, and Renga. Buta blushed, thinking she would volunteer, but Itsuki clarified the task. After clearing things up, the three were motivated to complete their tasks. Itsuki wished them luck on their journey. Itsuki had turned his attention towards Wendy, informing her that he needed some favors. Wendy gladly accepted the requests. Meanwhile, all the girls headed down toward their missions and Shiro was left sleeping on the couch. Later that night, Itsuki began his mass production process, utilizing his hand molding and forgery skills. His body nearly gave up due to the sheer volume of items he produced. He also made improvements to the quality of the potions he had been creating. Before ending that day, Wendy came in and gave her master a blanket. The next day, Itsuki and his group were already prepared. They still had 4 days before the deadline, and all they needed to do now was sell all the products Itsuki had created. They approached the day with high spirits and enthusiasm. Itsuki and his group positioned their shop in the busy part of town. Passers-by couldn't resist taking a look as a large crowd gathered, trying to buy a certain product. This item specifically caught the attention of the ladies, who were in awe as they stared at the newest products available in town. In the middle of the crowd, Aina, Sorte, and Renga stood out. They wore uniquely designed clothes that made them look astonishing and beautiful. As they modeled the new clothing, Itsuki and Wendy stood beside them, trying to catch people's attention. Itsuki revealed that these clothes weren't just for fashion. They also had blessings that made the wearer stronger. This unique style had already caught the crowd's interest. Almost all the ladies in the area ended up buying something, each with her own preferences. Some liked the set Aina was wearing, while others preferred the other two sets. Before long, the area was flooded with people. Shiro even pitched in to help distribute the items. Meira had checked in on Itsuki to see how he was doing. She smiled, happy that her idea had proven really useful for him. She praised the marketing strategy he used, saying he chose and narrowed it down properly. This stimulated customers to buy his product. Itsuki thanked her for helping him formulate the plan the night before, but Meira revealed that she didn't actually do anything. The idea came from her brother Dharma. Itsuki even joked that he really didn't want to be indebted to Dharma. Their short conversation ended as Shiro needed Meira's help in finding the right product for the buyers. Itsuki said his goodbyes, acknowledging that he still owed Meira. She, an elegant and sophisticated lady, smiled, thinking that Itsuki was indeed an interesting person. Over the next 3 days, Itsuki and his team continued their routine. At night, Itsuki would create different designs, and by day, they would sell these items. The deadline date had passed, and we could see that they reached their goal of 120 million. Everyone was happy because they had successfully pulled it off. Even Sorte and Renga were crying. Itsuki thanked Wendy as all the designs were hers. She was just happy to help her master. On the same day, the group went to Yasus's mansion. Itsuki brought out all the promised money. Yasus went silent for a while upon seeing it. A mediator confirmed that the coins were legitimate and amounted to 120 million. Yasus tried to invite Itsuki for dinner, but he quickly rejected, claiming he had other plans. Itsuki then headed towards the Adventurers Guild, where they started their mini-celebration. All their close friends were present, and they enjoyed a bountiful feast. Sorta had a bit too much to drink and suggested more drinks for everyone. While having fun, Renga approached Itsuki, about to apologize again, but Itsuki interrupted. Itsuki smiled and assured Renga that everything was fine now, making Renga glad. She thanked Itsuki once again. Days passed, and Itsuki kept using his forgery skill until its level increased. The level of alchemy also went up, and Itsuki noticed a new skill called Experience Circle. Soon Shiro noticed that Itsuki seemed stressed. Itsuki mentioned that their family was growing and so were their expenses. Wendy suggested that she could also work, but Itsuki strongly disagreed. Wendy reminded him to ask for help if needed. Eventually, Itsuki, feeling the pressure, went to Reinrich for assistance in finding a job. Reinrich noticed Itsuki's recent productivity but advised him to focus on developing his alchemy skills rather than getting distracted by relationships. During their conversation, Itsuki remembered something and shared with Reinrich the new skill he had acquired from constant use of alchemy and forgery experience circle. Reinrich cautioned Itsuki not to disclose this skill to anyone, emphasizing the rarity of reaching level 9 in alchemy and the potential for others to take advantage of him. After Itsuki agreed to keep it a secret, Reinrich tasked him with making 500 normal potions within 3 days. On his way home, Itsuki reflected on his personal growth and the possibility of being taken advantage of, similar to his previous job. While proud of his progress as an alchemist, Itsuki had a chance encounter with a girl running towards him. Despite telling her to move aside, the two collided, and Itsuki found himself in an unexpected situation, feeling both flustered and surprised. The two got up and the girl, named Origol, figured out that Itsuki used to be a drifter. She introduced herself and said she lived closer to the center of the town, hinting that she came from a rich family. Origol even mentioned that her grandpa was the town's lord. Itsuki, upon hearing this, asked Origol not to tell anyone about what had happened to them. After that, Origol invited Itsuki to go on a date with her. While they strolled around, Itsuki shared that he found the town a nice place to live, feeling comfortable compared to back in Japan. He did mention encountering some intimidating individuals like Reinrich, Yasus, and Darwin, but explained why he was happy among the town's people. Origol, upon learning that Itsuki liked the town, thanked him and expressed her joy that he grew to appreciate the place. She then ran off waving goodbye while Itsuki sighed. Meanwhile, Yasus had just arrived at the town lord's estate in a carriage. He reported the incident involving Renga. The lord was okay with the outcome but wanted to address it publicly. However, the lord was more impressed that Yasus helped resolve the situation for the sake of a drifter. Yasus thought Itsuki was interesting and believed in making connections. The lord agreed with Yasus, assuming she had already met Itsuki. Origol mentioned that Itsuki was her type of man. Upon hearing that, Yasus was surprised. Origol suddenly started coughing and claimed that her condition had not been getting better, making it difficult for her and the others. She said she had already worked on the transfer of power. Yasus suddenly thought of someone, piquing Origol's interest. However, Yasus dismissed that idea, wished Origal well, and left the office. Origal then went to the window hoping to catch more glimpses of the city. Meanwhile, Wendy took some laundry out of the sun with Renga. She apologized to the newcomer for making her help. Range was okay with it and admired Wendy's beauty. Since the others were out working, Wendy suggested they have lunch. During the meal, Renga kept staring at Wendy. Wendy wondered what was wrong, and Renga recalled how she had been slapped. Renga started apologizing to Wendy for what she had done to her most important person. Seeing that Wendy didn't have the demeanor of a slave looking at her master, Renga felt remorse for almost harming Wendy's loved one. Wendy reassured her, saying it was fine. Since Itsuki had already forgiven her, Wendy would do the same because of her love for Itsuki. However, she reminded Renga to be mindful and not to act recklessly next time. As they tidied up their table, Wendy asked Renga to bring food to Itsuki because our protagonist used to be a workaholic, tending to forget his meals. They chuckled about it, and Wendy went to wash the dishes. She remembered always saying she loved her master, but her heart would ache because ever since that night, Itsuki hadn't held her. She longed for proof that Itsuki loved her too. Shiro noticed her and asked where she was hurt. Wendy hugged Shiro and pretended she was hurt. Meanwhile, Itsuki busily searched for the process of making a miracle drug, something that could remove all negative conditions, diseases, and curses, and even recover lost body parts. He wondered if he could use the experience circle with it. Suddenly, a potion bottle appeared in his palm. Confused, Itsuki checked the potion's description and found that it could do exactly what he had imagined. Just as he saw the side effects, Renga appeared and surprised Itsuki. Renga handed over his meal while Itsuki discreetly hid the potion. He realized it would be bad if people found out he had just created a secret medicine. Itsuki tried calming himself down because he hadn't managed to create a miracle drug before. He wondered if he was even allowed to make one in the first place. Shiro found him thinking about it. After a while, Itsuki decided to keep quiet and returned the meal basket to Wendy. Wendy tried to tell Itsuki something, but he dismissed it. He noticed her sad expression, but he didn't do anything about it. Later, Aina and Sorte returned from their quest looking dirty. Itsuki asked for details, but the two took their time to take a bath first. Itsuki then listened to them talk about their mission. They were hunting the mutated Vorpal bunny from a monster trader. Besides its fast speed, it was as intelligent as a human and could communicate with other monsters. Aina and Sorte had a tough time and had to make a tactical retreat. Sorte vowed to get revenge on the Vorpal bunny and decided to go with Renga this time. Itsuki casually wished them luck, but Sorte also wanted to bring Shiro. She wanted to borrow someone strong like Shiro. Everyone then left, excited to hunt the Vorpal bunny. Itsuki couldn't help but sigh when he found himself alone with Wendy, who had decided to prepare dinner for just the two of them. He realized it had been a while since they had spent time together without anyone else around. The two had a peaceful dinner, and afterward, Itsuki went to the balcony. Feeling a bit awkward about being alone with Wendy, he couldn't shake off the promise of properly nailing her the next time they got the time. Taking a moment to gather himself, Itsuki slapped himself and decided to take a bath. He made sure he was clean and kept reminding himself to handle things properly this time. Standing in front of Wendy's room, he recalled his ex-colleagues talking negatively about men who only focused on their desires. Just as he was about to knock, Wendy appeared behind him, catching him off guard. Wendy invited him inside, and the two found themselves in an awkward situation. In an attempt to break the tension, Wendy suggested making some tea, but Itsuki, feeling conflicted, took hold of her hand. He wondered if he could keep the promise he had made to her. Wendy, surprised, agreed to it and expressed her desire for Itsuki to touch and hold her, wanting to be close to him always. Itsuki interrupted her by sealing her lips with his, surprising Wendy. Through his actions, Itsuki made Wendy realize that she truly loved him. Under the moonlight, the two embraced each other. They continually sought for each other and deepened their relationship. Upon feeling that Wendy went out of breath, Itsuki apologized, but Wendy was fine with it. Wendy bared herself in front of Itsuki, and our protagonist couldn't help but think how beautiful Wendy was. Itsuki brought Wendy on the bed and carefully caressed her. The two enjoyed the night together. Morning comes, and Itsuki finds Wendy sleeping beside him. He smiled and started patting her head until she woke up. Wendy was surprised, and the two sweetly greeted each other good morning. Meanwhile, the Red Front girls, including Shiro, were still busy hunting the Vorpal bunny. Sorta was already frustrated while chasing it, and a huge bear joined the fight to stop her. However, Sorte quickly defeated it and shouted that the target was going in Renga's direction. Seeing the bunny coming, Renga put up a stance and skillfully deflected the Vorpal bunny's blades. However, it quickly outmaneuvered her and tried to escape. Renga then threw a strong punch, destroying the ground and sending the target flying. As the bunny fell, Aina waited below with a net and captured it. Everyone celebrated as they caught the bunny, and Sorte planned to make a stew out of it. However, when Sorte tried to grab it out of the net, a dummy was found instead of the Vorpal bunny. Sorte couldn't help but scream out loud in frustration. In the bushes, the Vorpal bunny laughed silently until someone appeared behind it. It was Shiro, glaring at it with a predator's eyes. The Vorpal bunny kept running away, but Shiro always managed to catch up to it. Apparently, Shiro was excited to eat the bunny as a stew, and the bunny shrieked as it met its end. Back at the mansion, Itsuki and Wendy were acting like a married couple, helping each other with house chores. Just then, someone called out from their front door. Outside, an old man with Origol was waiting. Itsuki was surprised to find Origol standing in front of his door. Let's rewind to the time before Itsuki got the estate from Darwin. In a certain dungeon, monsters were being taken down one by Hayato, a Japanese drifter whom Itsuki met on his first day in the isekai world. After making sure his teammates were okay, Hayato noticed their mage was getting tired, so they decided to take a break. They cooked some soup, enjoyed it, and talked about their quest to find the elixir in the huge dungeon needed for Origol's recovery. They learned she had been poisoned in an assassination attempt. Hayato explained that was how wicked people operated, and they couldn't just let it slide. The conversation then turned to Itsuki, and Hayato mentioned he should do well with his alchemy skills. As it turned out, Hayato had been collecting ores for Itsuki along the way. The girls sensed that Hayato was looking out for his hometown buddy, Itsuki. Their serious discussion was interrupted by their catgirl party member still feeling hungry. The mage and elf returned, warning them not to make too much noise in the dungeon. With their mage feeling better, Hayato's party continued their quest to save their lord Origol. Origol's butler apologized for the sudden visit and expressed hope for a meeting with Itsuki. Our protagonist felt confused, so the butler introduced Origol as the town lord, causing Itsuki to become worried. They sat down for a cup of tea in the living room, and Itsuki began apologizing for his earlier rude behavior. Origol laughed it off and requested Itsuki not to be too formal. She assured him that she wasn't concerned about him seeing her undergarments. The butler gave Itsuki a disapproving look. Origol then disclosed that she was a halfling and, despite her appearance, a full-grown adult. She also introduced her butler Soma. Learning about Origol's true identity, Itsuki couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. Origol had wondered if Itsuki had bought the estate he lived in. He informed her that he acquired it from Darwin. Curious about its comfort, Origol inquired, and Itsuki assured her it was more than enough. He described the living space, a fantastic bath, and an alchemy room. Origol, intrigued, asked if she could use the bath in the future. Itsuki proudly detailed the estate's bath, but Origol suddenly started coughing hard. Soma became concerned, but Origol insisted she was fine. Noticing Origol's pale face, Itsuki requested Wendy to fetch something. Wendy returned with a restorative potion enriched into a cure-all. Origol hesitated to accept it due to its expensive cost, but Itsuki reassured her. After consuming the potion, Origol began to feel its effects. Itsuki inquired about her well-being, and Origol thanked him, feeling better already. Pleased, Itsuki then asked about the purpose of their visit. Origol later recalled the incident with Renge, causing Itsuki to become concerned. Numerous reports about the incident reached her, and she carefully reviewed them. Although she knew that Itsuki and Yasus had already reached an agreement, she informed Itsuki that she approached her work in a detached manner. It wasn't that she didn't consider the good intentions of helping others, but she believed she understood Itsuki's temperament. Origol decided to overlook the situation this time, which made Itsuki grateful. Since there were no serious complaints, she decided to let the matter concerning Renga go. However, she expressed that Itsuki had been causing too many problems lately. Itsuki felt overwhelmed, not knowing where to begin, and Origol continued to scold him until Soma politely requested that Itsuki avoid trouble for the time being. He simply wanted Origol to take it easy at her job. Origol told Soma to stop interfering, and then she started coughing heavily again. She leaned on Soma, and Itsuki could see that her condition was worse than before. A weakened Origol apologized and excused herself, explaining that she wasn't feeling well. Itsuki and Wendy saw Origol's carriage off. Wendy wondered if Origol was okay, and Itsuki expressed his concern too, thinking about the nature of Origol's condition. Just then the girls arrived, and Sorta had a bag with a smug look on her face. Itsuki was curious about how their mission had gone, and Sorta confidently claimed it was easy, though Renga mentioned it was troublesome. Sorta started to explain when someone jumped out of the bag she was holding. The Vorpal bunny leaped into Wendy's clothes, and Itsuki tried to get it out while scolding Sorta. The Vorpal bunny trembled in fear, clinging to Wendy's thighs. Shiro then picked it up and told it to stop. That afternoon in the Lord's mansion, Origol apologized to Soma while lying in her bed. Soma left her room, and a man named Walkus questioned if Origol was unwell again. Soma confirmed that their lord had already fallen asleep. Walkus then expressed concern, stating that the elixir they had requested from Hayato's group seemed ineffective, and he wondered if there was anything they could do for their lord. According to Reinrich, only a spiritual medicine could cure Origol's curse. They were deeply worried about seeing their lord in such a poor state. Meanwhile, Itsuki thought about Origol's condition. He realized that the cure-all could only alleviate Origol's pain, and questioned whether it was actually an illness. Opening a box, he retrieved the miracle drug he had accidentally created. The next morning, Itsuki got ready for work. He cleaned up, put on his office uniform, and added his otherworldly outfit. He informed Wendy that he was heading out and might be late, planning to have dinner outside. Concerned, Wendy asked where he was going. Itsuki said he was going to the Lord's place. At the same time, Origol, the Lord, was being attended to by her maids. They wiped away sweat, tended to her hair, and helped her maintain a neat appearance. Origol wanted to look presentable at all times, unsure of when an important moment might arise. One of the maids expressed her love for the town, and another, holding back tears, mentioned how everyone cherished the town that Origol managed and protected. She encouraged Origol not to lose hope. Origol agreed, apologized for appearing weak, and expressed her desire to see more of the town, looking outside the window with a sad expression. Suddenly, Soma knocked on the door and informed Origol that someone from the Alchemy Guild had arrived. Walkus, puzzled about Itsuki's unexpected visit, requested him to avoid coming without a prior appointment. They soon reached Origol's office, and Soma escorted Itsuki inside. Itsuki greeted Origol, who felt sorry for showing her vulnerable side. Itsuki apologized for the abrupt visit, but Origol insisted he stop being so humble in her presence. Itsuki had taken something out of his bag. He held a potion bottle and said that it was something he needed to give to Origol. Soma wondered what it was, and Itsuki claimed it was a miracle drug. Surprised, Soma and Walkus wondered where Itsuki got it, but he changed the topic. He then asked Origol if it wasn't an illness that had been affecting her body. Origol couldn't say anything. Soma then ordered the maids to leave and explained to Itsuki that Origol was cursed. Itsuki asked for details, and Walkus told him that it was a curse inflicted by their previous co-worker, a butler. Itsuki wondered why he would do that, and Walkus explained that someone had instigated the whole thing as an assassination attempt. Surprisingly, the culprit was Dadarl, whom Itsuki knew well. Itsuki wondered why Dadarl would do that, and Origol claimed it was for her position as the Lord. If she died, it was highly possible for Darwin, Dadarl's father, to become the Lord. It was basically to gain political power. Itsuki realized once again how much of a trash Dadarl was. Itsuki had a moment of realization. Origol was the one who asked for Hayato's team, but Origol insisted that even Hayato couldn't succeed. Feeling regretful for underestimating Hayato, Itsuki gave the life-saving miracle drug to Origol. With shaky hands and eyes filled with tears, Origol accepted the medicine and expressed gratitude. Itsuki, despite feeling satisfied, saw Soma and Walkus quickly thanking him for saving their leader's life. They insisted on repaying him, and Itsuki, pondering for a moment, came up with an idea. With a smile, he asked Origol to make the town a comfortable place for him to live. Origol agreed. Leaving the mansion with a content smile, Itsuki noticed a commotion near the gates. Outside, familiar-looking girls were trying to enter, facing resistance from the guards. Itsuki was curious about what the girls were up to. Renge, Aina, and Sorte, concerned after hearing that Itsuki went to the Lord's place alone, expressed their worries. Itsuki reassured them that everything went well, and realizing their genuine concern, invited them for a drink. In a cheerful mood, he promised to treat them, and the group headed out to the town together. A few days later, Itsuki enjoyed a cup of tea. Renge had become his slave, just like Aina and Sorte. Many things happened, but now it seemed he could finally have some peaceful days. He enjoyed the tea that Wendy had made. He smiled, and Yasis agreed that the tea was good. Reinrich, on the other hand, wondered if Itsuki had taken a break from his training. Meanwhile, Darwin praised Itsuki for gaining control over another member of the Red Front Party. Itsuki hoped that these three were not present during his supposedly peaceful tea time. He knew that they had come to learn more about the miracle drug related to the failed assassination attempt. Seeing the three most important figures of the town in front of him, Itsuki wondered if another assassination attempt was being planned. Suddenly, Darwin began to wonder if the place he had given Itsuki was a pleasant living space. Itsuki assured him that it was, and expressed gratitude for everything, including the alchemy room and bath that Darwin had provided. Darwin proudly mentioned that he had brought in the best magical tools in the kingdom, emphasizing how costly it had been for him. At that moment, someone entered and informed Itsuki that he could make a considerable profit just by selling the alchemy room. Meira arrived to deliver Itsuki's guild card and expressed eagerness to work together. Itsuki noticed how happy Meira was, and she mentioned being one step ahead of Dharma, her stepbrother, whom Itsuki preferred not to deal with due to his unpredictable behavior. Darwin changed the topic and asked Itsuki about the miracle drug, even assuming that Itsuki had made it himself. The room fell silent as everyone waited for Itsuki's response. Itsuki then spoke up, claiming that the goddess had given him the drug when he arrived in their world. He reassured them that he didn't have the power to create it. Yasis, knowing Itsuki was a drifter, agreed. However, Darwin abruptly demanded Itsuki's guild card, creating a tense atmosphere. Itsuki, feeling uneasy, explained that sharing someone's guild card was considered unacceptable. Despite Itsuki's protests, Darwin's intimidating demeanor eventually made him agree to show the guild card. He cursed out loud when he saw the legendary spatial magic. Yasis also saw the skill marked with question marks and guessed it had something to do with the miracle drug. It was at level 9, impressing him. Itsuki said it was his pocket money skill that could generate 500,000 nar in one day, which is actually bad news for the economy. When Reinrich saw Itsuki looking flustered, he thought it was the experience circle that helped create the miracle drug. Darwin asked again about the miracle drug, wondering if spatial magic was the skill used. Itsuki became more worried that they might find out he made it. Just then someone arrived and exclaimed she was curious too. Darwin couldn't help but curse at Origol, who had just arrived looking healthy. Itsuki asked about Hayato's team, but Origol was more focused on greeting her friends. She then sat on Itsuki's lap, calling him Oni-chan. Yasis congratulated Origol on her recovery, but Darwin was more interested in how close Origol and Itsuki seemed. Origol agreed that they were lovey-dovey. Reinrich sighed, finding it awkward to watch a woman in her 40s calling a boy her big brother. Since Itsuki was confused, Origol explained that she was a halfling related to elves. Her current appearance would last until she died. She claimed she was legal, which would be convenient for Itsuki. Mira wondered why the town lord came, and Origol reminded Itsuki about his promise to use the fantastic bath. She suggested going in together, but Itsuki refused. Itsuki then noticed the big three talking on their own, and Darwin excused themselves, saying they had something to do. They asked Origol to have a drink next time to celebrate her recovery. Origol had decided to use the bath, and Itsuki guided her to it. Itsuki was still concerned about Origol's condition, but the Lord insisted that she was already feeling better. Itsuki was relieved to hear that Origol was fine. While humming, Origol undressed and tied up her hair. She eagerly entered the bath, and Itsuki couldn't believe that she was already in her 40s. Mira expressed her happiness that their lord was doing well, and Itsuki agreed. It then dawned on Itsuki that Mira had been following them the entire time and was also undressed, ready to use the bath. She reminded him that she was the one who had made the bath and wanted to enjoy its warmth. The three of them soon entered the bath, with Origol leaning silently on Itsuki and Mira facing him. Origol declared that the bath was the best, and Itsuki suggested thanking Mira for it. Mira was pleased that the Lord liked the bath. Itsuki had mentioned how close Origol was to the big three. Origol then claimed that the three of them were her childhood friends, and they were inseparable. They used to chase each other all around the town. Origol then changed the topic and asked Itsuki who his favorite was among his friends. She also offered to join the competition. Suddenly, Mira stood up and declared that she wouldn't let Origol's words pass. She mentioned that Darwin wanted Itsuki to be his son-in-law. The two then started a war of nerves in the middle of the bath. Mira and Origol then became more intimate with Itsuki, asserting their competition with each other. The following morning, Itsuki walked down the hallway, still feeling sleepy. Mira and Origol had spent the night engaging in some girl talk while Itsuki found himself in the middle of it all. As he stumbled through the hallway, Wendy observed him with concern. Later in the kitchen, Mira, with a slight pout, remembered sharing the room with Itsuki and Origol the previous night. She reassured herself that everything was fine, but couldn't shake off a sense of frustration. At that moment, Itsuki entered the kitchen in search of Mira. Flustered, Wendy wondered what might be bothering him. Itsuki requested a cup of tea to help him stay awake, and Wendy promptly prepared one. While pouring the tea, Wendy felt a bit embarrassed for appearing flustered in front of Itsuki. In the living room, Sorta and Itsuki discussed Wendy's behavior. Sorta believed it was because of what had happened the day before. She explained that Wendy was upset about Itsuki sharing a room with Origol and Mira. Itsuki initially denied it, but soon admitted that it was indeed the cause. Sorta was surprised at how oblivious Itsuki was. Panicking, Itsuki wondered what to do, and Renge suggested a simple apology, saying Wendy wouldn't be upset about such a thing. Itsuki, raising his voice, declared that he would apologize while bowing, but as he started running, he tripped. Meanwhile, Aina approached Wendy and asked about Itsuki's whereabouts. After getting directions from Wendy, Aina noticed that Wendy didn't seem well and inquired about it. Wendy insisted it was nothing. Aina thought silently and realized something. Approaching Wendy, she suggested they take a bath together, leaving Wendy confused. The two friends entered the bath and Aina kindly helped Wendy wash her back. Wendy, feeling a bit puzzled, received compliments from Aina about her body, with Aina mentioning that it was different from her own, which was more muscular. Aina assured Wendy that they could talk openly, and Wendy, expressing gratitude, shared her concerns. Aina apologized for not having experience in that area, but Wendy apologized too, admitting she was being selfish. Aina realized Wendy's feelings for Itsuki and confirmed them. Wendy, curious, asked if Aina felt the same way. Aina acknowledged her liking for Itsuki but clarified that her feelings were different. She wanted to protect him with all her strength. Aina also mentioned that Itsuki, despite being a great person, was a bit too lenient with women. Wendy agreed with a laugh. Aina reassured Wendy that Itsuki would never hurt her, and Wendy, convinced, asked Aina about dinner preferences. Later that night, Itsuki observed the luxurious dinner and noticed that Wendy and Aina seemed closer. Renge and Sorta also took notice, with Sorta expressing happiness that Wendy was in a good mood. After their dinner, Itsuki went to bed and felt regret for not apologizing in the end. Just then, someone knocked on his door, and it was Aina. Curious, Itsuki got up and opened the door. He then found Aina and Wendy in their nightgowns, making Itsuki embarrassed. Aina advised Itsuki not to let Wendy worry too much. Wendy said it was okay, but Aina believed that resolving a quarrel between a man and a woman should be settled in bed, according to other adventurers. However, Itsuki wondered why Aina was there, and Aina explained she came for future reference since she was also Itsuki's companion. She just wanted to observe everything, and Wendy began removing her clothes. Shortly after, Aina returned to her room and sorta wondered where her partner had gone. Seeing how red Aina was while covering her face and internally screaming, Sorta wondered what had happened. The following morning, Sorta's voice echoed throughout the estate. Everyone woke up, curious about what was going on. Sorta declared that the public morals in their house were not in order. Itsuki was puzzled about what Sorta meant. She mentioned that Aina had been acting strangely since she returned to her room the previous night. Sorta, having heard everything from Aina, confronted Itsuki, accusing him of everything. Itsuki tried to explain, but Sorta suddenly transformed into a representative of the Public Moral Committee, stating that immoral actions were not allowed. Itsuki became angry at Sorta's authoritative behavior and called her a dog. Sorta, in turn, became angry and clarified that she was a wolf. Itsuki embraced Wendy and declared that no one could prevent him from loving and being with her. He also pointed out that he owned the house and told Sorta to leave if she didn't agree. Renga attempted to intervene and stop Sorta from retaliating against Itsuki. Soon after, Itsuki had a seat for a coffee. Wendy understood it was because of what she did the previous night and planned to say sorry afterward. Itsuki declared it wasn't Wendy's fault. He then headed to Sorta's room as he felt he had spoken too much against her. He knocked on the door and Sorta came out, stating no one was inside. Itsuki apologized to Sorta, but the wolf was doubtful, wondering if he truly meant it. Itsuki asked about Aina's whereabouts. Renga explained Aina had left early while exclaiming she didn't have enough courage to be Itsuki's slave. Sorta began crying on the ground, feeling sorry for Aina, who was being treated poorly by a trash like Itsuki. Itsuki felt hurt as it was the first time he was called trash. Sorta looked at him and advised him to apologize to Aina later. Renga stepped in and asked them to stop arguing. Then she made a request to Itsuki. She mentioned that the bed felt too soft for her, as she was accustomed to firmer surfaces and her body felt stiff. Itsuki didn't have any medicine at the moment, so he decided to offer Renge a massage. Renge lay down on her stomach and Itsuki, who was confident due to his professional experience back on Earth, started the massage, focusing on the areas where Renge felt stiff. Suddenly, Renge began to feel something and seemed to act strangely. She mentioned feeling really good after the massage. Itsuki then shifted his attention to Sorta, who initially resisted his offer. Itsuki picked up Sorta and gently placed her on the bed, determined to find the stiff parts of her body. He began massaging Sorta's legs, surprising the wolf. As Itsuki continued the massage, Sorta started panting and feeling good. Despite only her legs being massaged, she felt a warmth spreading throughout her body. Sorta asked Itsuki to stop, her fluffy tail spinning around. At that moment, Itsuki noticed her tail and remembered how he used to have a pet on Earth, but couldn't have one because he was always at work. Knowing he wouldn't have much time for a pet, he decided not to get one. To soothe his tired self, he could only watch videos of animals. When he saw a fluffy tail wagging in front of him, Itsuki lost control of his rational thinking. He suddenly grabbed Sorta's tail, causing the wolf to shriek in surprise. Itsuki continued to feel the softness of her tail, and Sorta began to feel sensitive. She tried to ask Itsuki to stop, but he had already gone too far. Sorta started apologizing as Itsuki pressed his face against her fluffy tail. Sorta felt strange, and all she could do was shout in pleasure. Aina returned home and wondered what was happening to Sorta, who was acting strangely. Itsuki apologized for going too far. Not long after at the Alchemy Guild, Reinrich asked Itsuki to deliver some potions. She also thanked him for healing Origol, but Itsuki was surprised because Reinrich was suddenly being very formal. Reinrich explained that she was at the age where she valued old friendships. Itsuki was impressed to hear something gentle from her. Reinrich predicted that Itsuki would also understand this feeling soon, and Itsuki realized that people become more sensitive as they get older. Itsuki jokingly told her to be quiet, and then he pretended to be scared as he stood up to leave. As Itsuki left with Shiro, they received a souvenir from Right. After leaving the Alchemy Guild, Itsuki invited Shiro to grab a meal and asked her what she wanted to eat. Shiro craved some meat and suddenly someone approached them discreetly. However, Shiro noticed the person pulling out a weapon. Quickly, Shiro pushed Itsuki out of harm's way and kicked the attacker. The person tumbled to the ground, revealing a boy who had targeted Itsuki's magic bag. Seeing Itsuki flustered, the boy, attempting to divert attention, threw a smoke bomb into the busy street. Shiro warned Itsuki not to inhale the smoke, even though it wasn't poisonous. Shiro then headed off to retrieve Itsuki's bag. In one of the narrow paths, the boy thought Itsuki probably had lots of money because he was a famous alchemist in the area. He was happy at the thought of eating something better than stale bread. However, Shiro suddenly appeared and landed in front of him. She wanted Itsuki's bag back. The boy clenched his teeth and tried to resist. Shiro swiftly moved, effortlessly holding back the boy's hand with the weapon. Frightened by Shiro's stern look, the boy dropped to the ground. He started complaining like a little kid, saying he needed the bag to eat. Shiro looked at him with pity and gave him a bag of cookies she had received from Right. She said they were delicious and understood how tough it was to be hungry. Shiro then left, leaving the bewildered boy behind. He opened the bag, feeling annoyed at being teased. Nevertheless, he started munching on the cookies. Shiro went out on her own and discovered that she had gotten lost. At that moment, Mira spotted her and took her to one of Yasu's places. The staff there began dressing up Shiro for fun, even though they knew she had caused trouble just a few days ago. Shiro noticed that one of the workers was scared of her, so she apologized for the chaos she had caused. This cute gesture changed the workers' attitudes, and they continued pampering her. Myra apologized to the establishment's madame, who was fine with it, and thanked Mira for helping with the shop's repairs. Mira praised Yasus for being excellent in everything and having many connections. She then requested to keep Shiro at the establishment while she looked for Itsuki. The workers continued dressing Shiro in various outfits until Itsuki showed up. Everyone wanted to keep Shiro, but Itsuki told them to stop playing with her. Itsuki thanked Mira for watching over Shiro and also expressed gratitude to Shiro for retrieving his bag. Shiro was happy to assist her. Soon after, rain poured heavily in the town. Two cloaked individuals knocked on Itsuki's estate's doorstep. Wendy informed Itsuki that they had some guests. Itsuki inquired about their identity, and it turned out to be Hayato and another party member, Letty, both wearing sad expressions. The two had entered, and Wendy took their cloaks to dry. Hayato felt happy seeing Itsuki's mansion for the first time. Wendy then served them tea, and Hayato apologized for their sudden visit. Itsuki was okay with it and attempted to speak formally, but Hayato preferred a more casual conversation. Hayato mentioned he knew about Itsuki's recent activities, and Itsuki said they were all just troubles. Itsuki wondered why Hayato came to visit. Hayato explained he came to express gratitude and apologize at the same time. Itsuki looked confused, and Hayato clarified it was about Origol. His team was supposed to retrieve an elixir from the dungeon, but they failed the request and caused trouble for Itsuki. Itsuki understood and mentioned he had the miracle drug by chance with no use for it. He also expressed a desire to help Origol, as he had connections with her. Itsuki then wondered if the dungeon was difficult given that even Hayato had a tough time. Hayato had insisted that it was a situation where they needed to stop the quest. In a flashback, Hayato's team had observed that the number of monsters was increasing. He had warned everyone to stay close and watch each other's backs. However, one of their party members, Chris, would easily get tired. Despite claiming she was fine, Hayato always decided to take a break for her sake. She kept apologizing and cowered in a corner. She knew she was dragging down the whole team and recalled how her previous party would scorn her for being useless. Letty then noticed her trembling and wondered if she was okay. Chris tried to get back up but accidentally triggered a trap. A trap activated and an arrow flew toward her right eye. That is why they gave up on their mission, and Hayato kept blaming himself. Letty insisted it wasn't Hayato's fault because she was the one close to Chris. Itsuki then asked about Chris's condition. Hayato explained that Chris had lost her right eye and only an elixir could fully heal her. Itsuki had an idea. Hayato mentioned that Chris was a dear friend, and he vowed to do whatever it took to help her. Fortunately, he learned that an elixir was up for auction in the capital. Money was no object to him. All he wanted was to heal Chris's eye. Itsuki only needed the materials for the elixir, but seeing Hayato's determination, he understood that Hayato wanted to assist Chris personally. The rain stopped, and Hayato and Letty said goodbye. Itsuki then reminded Hayato that although he was younger in this world, he was more experienced in life and promised to do his best to help. Hayato was grateful for the support from another Japanese person like Itsuki. He asked if Itsuki could join him at the auction, and Itsuki, realizing he hadn't left town, quickly agreed. Hayato mentioned that it would take 2 days by carriage, and Itsuki promised to arrange one. They planned to leave in 3 days, and Hayato wondered if Itsuki would bring others. Itsuki wasn't certain about the Red Front girls, but Wendy and Shiro were likely to come along. Suddenly, Letty attempted to communicate something to Hayato. The hero was puzzled, wondering what could be the matter, but Letty ceased speaking. Hayato became intrigued, yet Letty refused to divulge any more information. Strangely, Ito, who is usually oblivious, grasped the situation. He informed Hayato that Letty preferred not to encounter any disturbances during their journey together. Itsuki then pondered about Hayato's favorite person among his admirers. Letty scolded Itsuki, urging him not to be insensitive about delicate matters. Itsuki was shocked and offered an apology. Meanwhile, at the inn where Hayato's team was staying, their beastman companion attempted to get Chris to join them for a meal. However, Chris remained seated in a corner, looking lifeless. Since Chris wouldn't respond, the Mii went to Emily and cried. She was worried about Chris, who was injured and not eating again. Emily patted her head and agreed that it was concerning, especially since Chris's problems were more than just physical injuries. Hayato and Letty returned and asked what the two were talking about. The girls told them it was about Chris. Hayato looked sad and decided to talk to her. He went upstairs to Chris's room, paused for a moment, and then knocked on the door. Just then he heard Chris repeatedly apologizing while crying in bed. Hayato quietly went back downstairs and told the others that Chris wasn't doing well. They all sat down for a meeting. They just wanted Chris to get better soon, and Hayato agreed. Letty then suggested asking a certain person for help. Hayato asked if she meant Itsuki. Letty reminded him that Itsuki had promised to help Hayato if he ever needed it. Emily agreed and told Hayato not to take on too much by himself and to rely on others. Hayato then decided to ask Itsuki for advice. Using a communication device, Hayato explained the situation to Itsuki, who told him and his team to come over to his house. Although Hayato felt bad for bothering him, Itsuki reassured him that it was fine. After the call ended, Hayato asked Wendy for help based on what she had heard. Wendy said she would be happy to assist. Soon after, Itsuki welcomed Hayato and the girls. Wendy guided them inside the mansion. Itsuki noticed that instead of just holding flowers, Hayato had brought a whole bouquet. Wendy then saw Chris, who looked sad and had a bandage over her right eye. Emily asked if they really lived in such a grand place. Wendy was surprised to see her. Itsuki asked if they knew each other. Emily then warned Itsuki not to hurt Wendy. In a respectful tone, Wendy asked Emily not to threaten him. When Itsuki questioned why Wendy was speaking so formally, she asked him not to dig deeper into it. Later, they gathered for dinner. Itsuki announced that it was a gathering for friends who would soon set off on an adventure to the imperial capital. He told everyone to enjoy the meal, and the delicious food impressed Hayato's girls. Itsuki then suggested that the girls use the mansion's bath. The girls mentioned that they already had one at the inn, but a proud Itsuki told them not to compare it to those simple baths. He explained that the bath in his mansion was a replica of one from his hometown, designed by the famous Mira. Emily and Letty were impressed by this. The girls decided to accept the offer and quickly got up after the meal. Itsuki mentioned that the bath was mixed and told Hayato to join the girls. Hayato refused, but Letty still called him shameless. Wendy then invited Chris to join them and Hayato watched them leave. Itsuki advised Hayato to trust Wendy to handle things. Though hesitant, Hayato agreed. Itsuki remarked that Chris had a lot on her mind. Wendy apologized to Chris for asking her to help wash the dishes. Chris said she was fine with doing that much. Wendy asked how the food was, and Chris replied that it was delicious. Wendy then mentioned that she wanted to try Chris's cooking. Chris was surprised. Wendy explained that she had heard from Hayato and the others that Chris's cooking was really good. Chris denied it and suddenly admitted that she was thinking of leaving Hayato's party. Wendy asked why. Chris said she felt like she was holding everyone back and causing trouble, especially after getting injured during an important quest. She believed Hayato's party would be better off without her. Wendy asked if that was how she truly felt, knowing Chris wanted to be with Hayato and the others. Chris admitted she did want to stay with them. At that moment, Letty appeared and glared at Chris. She exclaimed that they would starve without Chris, and Mii agreed. Emily and Hayato also agreed that they would struggle if Chris left the party. Hayato reminded Chris how much she had helped them in the past and said that was the only reason they wanted her with them. Chris quietly cried and Hayato and the girls hugged her, giving her the warmth and support she needed. Itsuki then appeared and thanked Wendy for her help. Wendy looked happy that everything had turned out well. Soon after, the girls relaxed in Itsuki's bath and realized it was far better than the one at the inn. As the older sister figure of the group, Letty reminded them not to soak too long or they might get dizzy. Chris, who was having her back washed by Letty, apologized for being a burden. Letty didn't mind since Chris was still injured. She was a bit concerned that the hot water might sting Chris's wounds, but Chris reassured her that she was fine. Chris then thanked Letty again. Letty responded by saying she wanted Chris to make her soup for the next day's meal, and Chris agreed. The girls then continued enjoying the relaxing bath. Meanwhile, Itsuki showed Hayato an item called the Pair's Rings of Vows. He explained that when worn, the rings increase the wearer's offense, defense, resistance to abnormal statuses, and magic power. The rings worked as a pair, and their power grew based on the couple's closeness. Hayato wondered why they were designed as a pair, and Itsuki confessed that he had wedding rings in mind when he created them. Hayato got flustered, but Itsuki quickly said he was just joking. When Hayato learned that the rings had 4 additional abilities, he found Itsuki impressive once again. Itsuki mentioned that he made enough rings for all of Hayato's girls and intended them as gifts. Hayato thanked him but asked him not to refer to the girls as part of his harem. As they walked out of the room, Hayato apologized to Itsuki for causing him trouble. Itsuki reassured him, saying it wasn't a problem since the materials used to make the rings had come from Hayato anyway. He also mentioned that he was planning to sell some items at an upcoming auction. Suddenly, Sorte appeared, looking as angry as a furious cat. Itsuki, noticing her red face, asked what was wrong. Sorta angrily scolded him for deciding to go to the imperial capital without informing them beforehand. Aina tried to calm Sorte down, while Renge explained that they had heard about it from Wendy. Itsuki, now worried, asked if the girls were planning to go with him. Sorta then grabbed Itsuki by the neck, complaining that they didn't have enough time to prepare for the trip. After being knocked to the floor, Itsuki groaned, and Hayato asked if he was okay. Sorte called Itsuki selfish and demanded to know who Hayato was. Hayato introduced himself to the girls, knowing they were members of the Red Line Party. The girls suddenly realized that the man in front of them was Hayato, the Dragon Slayer. Sorta then asked Aina and Renge if this was really the famed Dragon Slayer who had quickly risen to the rank of Count. The girls confirmed it, and Sorte's attitude changed instantly. She formally introduced herself and the others as members of Red Line. Hayato was glad to meet them, but Itsuki noticed that Renge seemed to be sizing him up, as if seeing Hayato as a competition. Aina introduced herself respectfully to Hayato, but he asked her to be more casual. Both were honored to meet each other and aware of their respective achievements. Sorta then demanded to know if Itsuki had any explanation for the sudden trip. Itsuki shrugged, saying they were going regardless. Sorta sighed, complaining that they had just returned from gathering materials and wished he'd show a bit of appreciation like before. Itsuki apologized and said they could stay home if they wanted to. This made Sorta even angrier, as she didn't want to stay behind while everyone else enjoyed the imperial capital. Aina suggested they should all go together for a change, and Renge agreed, saying it had been a while since their last trip. Sorta finally agreed but lamented that they had no time to prepare. Itsuki then told her to relax, reassuring them that as their leader he had already prepared everything they needed. Sorte was impressed by how thorough Itsuki was, but then Itsuki added that he had even picked out their underwear, from cute to sexy styles. Shocked, Sorte angrily demanded to know how he knew their sizes. Itsuki casually admitted that he had measured them just by looking. Hayato quickly interrupted, apologizing and explaining his part in the situation. Sorte reassured him, saying they were used to being pushed around by Itsuki. Hayato acknowledged the girls' circumstances and emphasized how important Itsuki was as a friend. He asked them to take care of him, and Sorte replied that it was their duty to do so. Suddenly, Shiro appeared and declared that she would protect Itsuki. Sorte agreed, knowing how strong Shiro was. Hayato realized that these girls were good people, and Itsuki confirmed it, calling them great friends. Just then, Hayato's girls appeared, with two of them completely knocked out from the heat of the bath. Hayato asked what had happened. Letty explained that Mie and Emily had stayed in the bath too long and got dizzy. Itsuki praised Meira's bath for being so incredible, while Hayato apologized to him for the trouble. Letty and Chris did their best to care for Mie and Emily. After all that had happened, the day came to an end. With their carriage ready, it was time for Itsuki to head to the imperial capital, an expectant look on his face as the journey began. Itsuki declared it was the perfect day for an outing and told the girls there were a few precautions they should be aware of before their trip to the imperial capital. He handed them a travel handbook he had written for them to reference during the journey. After the briefing, Itsuki announced it was time to leave, but Sorta already looked exhausted for some reason. Renge agreed, feeling similarly. Aina explained that the preparation process was something essential in Itsuki's world. Wendy chimed in, mentioning that she had heard the person in charge of organizing trips was called a kanji, and shared how happy Itsuki seemed while handling all the preparations. Sorta then remembered something and asked if it was truly necessary for Itsuki to go through the trouble of tailoring new clothes for them. Aina apologized for the extra work, and Renge also pointed out how expensive the materials seemed and how well the clothes were made. Itsuki reassured them not to worry, saying that as their master, he didn't want to bring any disgrace to them. For a moment, Sorte found her master cool. Itsuki then admitted with a slight grin that he had guessed their sizes by eyeballing them before tailoring the clothes. Wendy appeared next and reminded Itsuki that they needed to meet up with Hayato's group first. Itsuki was surprised, and then, noticing Wendy's dress, recalled it was the first gift he had ever given her. Wendy explained that it would have been a waste not to wear it, and now was the perfect time given the trip. Both Itsuki and Wendy were left a bit embarrassed and sorta sighed at their exchange. She then hopped onto Itsuki's shoulder and urged him that it was time to get going. With that, the trip began. Shiro was surprised to see Itsuki driving the carriage and silently watched him. Meanwhile, the Red Line girls and Wendy were inside the carriage enjoying their conversations. They soon reached the city gates where Hayato's group was already waiting. The two groups then set off together toward the imperial capital. After some time, they took a break, and Itsuki complained that his back hurt from driving the carriage. Hayato pointed out that Itsuki just wasn't used to it. Looking out over the horizon, Itsuki asked Hayato how long it would take to reach the imperial capital. Hayato estimated that it would take 2 days if everything went smoothly. Itsuki accepted that timeline. Just then, Hayato noticed something near Itsuki's foot. a strange caterpillar-like creature with pouty lips resembling Kim Kardashian's. Itsuki immediately freaked out, grabbing Hayato's leg in fear, which got the attention of the girls. They rushed over and found Itsuki trembling and clinging to Hayato, terrified of the odd-looking caterpillar. The girls recognized it as a harmless caterpillar's child, and Shiro casually picked it up to show Itsuki that there was nothing to fear. However, this only made Itsuki panic more, and he screamed like a child, begging them to do something about the creature. Hayato's girls, hearing the commotion, came over and asked what was going on. Wendy explained that Itsuki had always been bad with insects. As Itsuki continued to cling to Hayato, Letty told him to let go of him, clearly unamused by the whole situation. Their journey continued, and as nightfall approached, Hayato suggested they set up camp for the night. The carriage stopped, and the girls got out to stretch their legs. Itsuki and Hayato went to the nearby river to fetch some water. While walking, Itsuki remarked how much fun camping was. Hayato asked if he had camped before, to which Itsuki admitted that he had gotten hooked on several camping-themed anime back in his world. On their way back, they encountered a majestic unicorn. Itsuki was awestruck, amazed to see a mythical creature in this new world. However, Hayato quickly noticed something odd, and Itsuki saw it too. Worm-like tentacles were wriggling from the base of the unicorn's horn, causing the creature clear discomfort. Hayato explained that this was a horn parasite, an insect that resembled a horn, and attached itself to horses, causing them pain. He also mentioned that humans could occasionally get infected by this parasite, advising Itsuki to be cautious. Hayato further explained that there was another creature, the horse moth, which had a horse-like body and could be mistaken for a Pegasus. At this point, Itsuki asked Hayato to stop describing the creepy creatures. The parasitic unicorn then glanced toward them and stood on its hind legs, making both men uneasy. Hayato suggested they retreat to camp, warning that if the unicorn attacked, it would be troublesome. For the first time, Itsuki found himself longing to return to Japan. Back at camp, the girls had returned with freshly hunted meat. Wendy and Chris teamed up to cook, sharing their delicious recipes. Soon, a hearty dinner was ready and everyone gathered to enjoy the food. After the meal, Emily offered to sing a traditional Elvish song, captivating the group. Letty spent some time listening to Hayato's stories, while Sorte took the first watch for the night. Despite the others falling asleep, Itsuki remained awake. Wendy, noticing this, asked if he planned to stay up all night, reminding him to take care of his health. Itsuki shrugged, saying it felt like a waste to sleep early while camping. Deciding to keep him company, Wendy stayed up with him, resting her head on his shoulder just like a first wife showing her quiet support. The next morning, the girls decided to take a dip in a nearby lake for a bath. As they enjoyed the refreshing water, Sorte complained about how difficult it was to bathe outdoors, especially since they had grown accustomed to the luxury of their house's bath. Renga agreed with her. However, something seemed to bother Sorte as she looked around at the other girls, including her own teammates. She realized that every one of them was quite impressive in one particular area. Letty also took a glance around and came to the same realization, that she was lacking in that same department. Sorte gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. Itsuki humorously reminded the readers that he and Hayato were sensible adults and had no intention of peeking. After the girls finished their baths, Itsuki served breakfast. The girls' eyes widened in surprise when they saw the hearty meal and were impressed by Itsuki's cooking skills. Itsuki explained that he had gotten used to cooking since he had lived alone before. Hayato's group approved of his cooking, and the Beast Girls, with their big appetites, quickly devoured the food. Wendy apologized for causing any trouble, but Itsuki reassured her that he enjoyed cooking from time to time. Once breakfast was finished, both Sorte and Renge felt content and happy to be full in the morning. Just then, Itsuki appeared carrying a box and mentioned that there was still dessert. Curious, Sorte asked what it was. Itsuki pulled out something that resembled an ice cream scoop from Earth. He scooped out a soft, cold substance from the box and placed it in a bowl. Hayato was surprised, instantly recognizing it as ice cream. Itsuki introduced the dessert to everyone, explaining it was ice cream. Hayato could both see and smell the familiar vanilla ice cream he once knew and eagerly asked if he could try it first. Taking a spoonful, Hayato trembled in happiness, overwhelmed by the taste. He was impressed that it was just like the real vanilla ice cream from Earth. Itsuki explained that after studying spatial magic, he had learned to manipulate the time and environment within the space it created. By controlling the temperature, he was able to make and store ice cream, bringing a bit of Earth into their otherworldly adventure. Hayato felt nostalgic as he savored the ice cream, remembering how in their current world, desserts were often just lumps of sugar. He had missed the distinct flavor and texture of ice cream. Itsuki, seeing how happy Hayato was, hadn't expected such a reaction. Hayato then wondered if their world had anything similar to vanilla. Itsuki explained that there was a plant called vanille, which closely resembled vanilla. The girls soon tried the ice cream as well, and a peaceful silence fell over the group as they all enjoyed the cold, delicious treat. Emily was impressed by how vanille could be used to make something as delightful as ice cream. while the Red Line girls found the dessert absolutely delicious. Itsuki even offered to teach Chris how to make ice cream for Hayato in the future. After their dessert break, the journey continued. But it wasn't long before the group encountered monsters. Aina, leading the Red Line girls, quickly took action. The monsters resembled large lizards, but Aina made quick work of them, slicing through their tough hides with ease. As more monsters appeared, Sorta effortlessly handled them, demonstrating her skill. When one monster tried to launch a surprise attack on her, Renga was there to support her, delivering a powerful kick that crushed the creature's head. Itsuki, witnessing the Red Line girls in action for the first time, was taken aback by their strength and coordination. As an adventurer party, they showed impressive teamwork and combat abilities, leaving Itsuki amazed by their skill in battle. Even though Itsuki understood that fighting monsters was a normal part of life in this world, he wasn't entirely prepared for the reality of it. As they continued their journey, a monster appeared behind him. Without thinking, Itsuki cast a spell he had been experimenting with called Invisible Jail. The spell summoned plate-like objects that sandwiched the monster's head until it exploded into bits. Although the spell was effective, Itsuki hadn't expected such a gruesome result, especially when used on a living creature. Seeing him go pale, Sorta asked if he was alright, while Shiro sat casually on top of the carriage, watching as Itsuki examined the remains of the creature he had just killed. This was his first time taking a life, and it clearly shook him. Wendy approached with a towel, offering comfort as she asked if he was feeling okay. Sorta noticed how pale he looked and voiced her concern as well. Itsuki apologized and admitted that he wasn't ready for this, deciding to step back from the fighting for now. Sorte reminded him that he had initially wanted to level up, but she understood his hesitation. Meanwhile, Hayato praised the Red Line girls for their impressive combat skills, having witnessed how effortlessly they dispatched the monsters. The journey continued, and before long, they finally arrived at the grand royal capital of Rashiayu. As they entered the city walls, Itsuki immediately noticed the vibrant atmosphere and the number of stylish women around. He couldn't help but glance at them, but Wendy caught him in the act. Flustered, Itsuki quickly remembered that he was already surrounded by peerless beauties in his own group. Meanwhile, Hayato was warmly welcomed by the townspeople, with even more women swooning over him. Hayato waved at them like a celebrity and asked one of the guards to inform his mansion that he was returning. A newbie guard approached Hayato, nervously asking if he could sign and bless his sword. Though unsure if his signature would carry any divine power, Hayato agreed to sign it anyway. Itsuki observed how incredibly popular Hayato was and wondered aloud if Letty was concerned about all the attention he was getting. Letty, unfazed, responded that she didn't worry about small things like that. Mi then mentioned how Hayato had been pressured to marry for political reasons, or simply because people wanted his child, which left Itsuki astonished at Hayato's situation. Hayato invited them all to his mansion, and when they arrived, Itsuki's group was stunned into silence. The mansion was enormous, at least 4 times the size of their own. Even though both Itsuki and Hayato were drifters, Sorte couldn't help but notice the stark difference in their wealth and influence. Not one to let things slide, Itsuki made a playful jab, pointing out that even though Renge and Sorte were both wolves, there was a big difference in their melon sizes. Wendy, sensing the conversation was getting out of hand, quickly asked them to stop arguing. Hayato welcomed Itsuki and his group into his mansion, encouraging them to make themselves at home. Almost immediately, a large number of beautiful maids appeared, greeting them in perfect unison. The sight of so many maids was overwhelming for Itsuki, who found it almost too dazzling to take in. A towering butler named Fried then made his entrance. He was huge and muscular, and he introduced himself as a half-giant, half-human. Itsuki, surprised by Fried's sheer size, learned from Hayato that Fried's lineage was responsible for his massive build. Apologizing for any discomfort his appearance might cause, Fried appeared concerned. However, Itsuki was quick to deny any such feeling, enthusiastically declaring that a giant muscular butler was super cool. Fried seemed taken aback, recalling that Hayato had said the exact same thing when they first met. He then asked Itsuki to call him by his name and promised to provide the best hospitality. Itsuki graciously accepted and expressed his trust in Fried. Fried led them to their guest rooms, which, while not overly luxurious, were furnished with items that were clearly of exceptional quality. Itsuki noticed the tasteful decor and how it felt several notches above what he had back at his own mansion. Fried explained that 3 rooms had been prepared for Itsuki's team, and if they needed anything, the maids were ready to assist. The room assignments were decided by lottery. Itsuki ended up sharing a room with Aina, who looked thrilled at the arrangement. Renga and Wendy were paired up, though Wendy quietly hoped to swap rooms with Aina. Lastly, Sorte and Shiro were placed in the 3rd room, although Shiro expressed her desire to share a room with Itsuki instead. A bit of tension arose, but Itsuki hoped they wouldn't cause a scene in Hayato's home. Soon after, Hayato was summoned to the castle by the king. Before leaving, he reminded Itsuki about the auction event scheduled for the next day. While Hayato and his girls headed to the castle, Chris stayed behind due to her slave status. She decided to use her time wisely by learning how to make ice cream from Itsuki, a new skill that she was excited to pick up. Itsuki got a chance to relax, and Fried served him some tea. Fried mentioned that being the disciple of the famous Rydrick was a big achievement, but Itsuki didn't think it was a big deal. Fried disagreed, saying that anomalous Rydrick was a well-known alchemist in the royal capital, and as her student, Itsuki deserved respect. Itsuki then realized just how incredible the old woman really was. With some free time before the auction, Itsuki asked Fried if there were any good places to visit nearby. Fried suggested the cathedral, saying it was a must-see in the royal capital. Itsuki's companions agreed and Fried drove them to the cathedral. Along the way, Itsuki noticed that the town and its atmosphere felt unfamiliar, reminding him of his business or company trips in Japan, something he enjoyed. When they arrived, Fried informed them they had reached the cathedral. Itsuki and the girls were speechless at the sight of the huge cathedral. It was far larger and more impressive than the photos Itsuki had seen online. Fried told them to enjoy their visit while he watched the carriage, and Itsuki thanked him. As they entered the cathedral, a friendly nun greeted them. She asked if they were visitors and suggested a donation of 1,000 nar per person. For the 6 of them, Itsuki didn't hesitate to donate. The nun thanked him in a playful manner and wished them blessings from the goddess. Itsuki wondered if the nun was really as innocent as she appeared. She then gave them a tour of the cathedral's accessible areas. When they reached the chapel, they saw a large statue of a goddess, surrounded by the famous stained glass windows of the royal capital cathedral. As Itsuki stared at the goddess's illustration, he remembered someone and wondered if it was the goddess he knew. Itsuki kept staring at the goddess's statue while the girls noticed how beautiful the afterglow was. Sorta agreed and asked Itsuki what he thought. Suddenly, the goddess greeted Itsuki, saying it had been a long time. This made Itsuki start crying uncontrollably, which confused Shiro, who asked why he was crying. Even Itsuki didn't understand why he was crying, only feeling warmth as tears flowed. The girls quickly gathered around him, worried. Meanwhile, some nuns whispered among themselves and one smiled greedily. Itsuki reassured everyone that he was fine and suggested they buy souvenirs for Hayato and the others. Shiro asked if seeing the goddess had really moved him that much. A nun then approached, saying that Itsuki's emotions were because of his deep faith. Another important-looking nun appeared, and Itsuki questioned her words. The nun confirmed them and suggested he pray more. A bright light shone on them, and the nun found it amazing. She told Itsuki that he held a great amount of divine energy. Itsuki asked if this was good, and the nun said it was. Having so much divine energy meant they could receive the goddess's blessing. The nun then encouraged him to learn healing magic and other strong holy spells. Itsuki was excited to hear this, but the nun added that he still didn't have enough holy power yet. This left Itsuki feeling disappointed, as his joy was short-lived. The nun suggested he should pray every day to increase his divine energy. Finding this simple, Itsuki decided to follow her advice. However, the nun said that simply praying wouldn't be enough. Itsuki disagreed, but the nun insisted otherwise. She called him lucky, claiming there was an easier way to gain the goddess's blessings. Curious, Itsuki asked what it was. Boldly, the nun revealed it was through donations. At that point, Itsuki decided to leave. The nun panicked, exclaiming that his divine energy was suddenly fading, but Itsuki ignored her. She begged him to wait, and Itsuki asked how much she wanted. The nun shamelessly asked for 100 gold coins, but quickly dropped the price to 10, eventually settling for just 1 gold coin. That was an amount Itsuki could easily afford thanks to his pocket change skill. He tossed the coin to the nun, who quickly snatched it and prayed for the goddess to bless him. Feeling exhausted after dealing with people just like those on Earth, Itsuki walked away. He then noticed Shiro sniffing the air. She said she smelled food and led the way. They arrived at a dining hall, where they found the nuns indulging in alcohol and tobacco. One nun happily boasted about buying those things with the believer's money. Seeing this, Itsuki silently closed the door. Shiro asked what was going on, so Itsuki took another peek, seeing the nuns opening a new bottle, laughing, drinking, and smoking. To Itsuki, they looked like degenerate people. One nun mentioned to the nun who had spoken to Itsuki that her skirt had a tear. She replied that she must have snagged it somewhere and decided to buy a new one using the believer's money. The laughter continued. Itsuki couldn't believe what he was seeing. He realized the place wasn't a church at all, but a secret base for shady business. He told Shiro they needed to leave because it was dangerous. But when he looked, Shiro was gone and had joined the nuns to enjoy the food. One nun noticed someone was peeking at them and kicked the door open, finding Itsuki. The man from before scolded him for snooping around. Another nun, acting like a thug, told Itsuki that the dining area was off limits. Itsuki claimed he was just lost and hadn't seen anything. A nun then dragged a cross over and said it couldn't be helped. She told Itsuki to be obedient, promising to send him home peacefully. Cathedral? More like a gang hideout. Itsuki, having nowhere to go, lay on the floor, wondering what was wrong with these nuns. Eventually, they tied him to a chair while Shiro continued enjoying the food. Surrounding him were nuns, most of them heavy smokers. And what concerned Itsuki even more was how easily Shiro had been swayed with food. He began to think about how he could escape. Suddenly, the nun wielding the cross told Itsuki he could leave, but she pointed her weapon at his face and demanded to know what exactly he had seen. Itsuki didn't know what to say, so the nun insisted he spill the truth. All he could recall was seeing the nuns indulging in alcohol and smoking despite pretending to be religious. The nun then said silence was golden and lifted her cross high, making Itsuki brace himself for a hit. But instead she paused and told him he was misunderstanding something. Itsuki asked what she meant, mentioning that seeing nuns smoking and drinking didn't seem right. The other nuns, acting like thugs, surrounded him, offended that their leader, Teresa, was being insulted. Teresa then explained that this was where the misunderstanding lay. She clarified that wine was considered the blood of God, so alcohol was allowed in the church. As for the cigars, she said they were made from rolled-up Yggdrasil leaves, which were harmless and used as medicine to heal and relieve stress. Teresa continued to explain that the church primarily operated on offerings they received in exchange for providing medical care or cleansing areas of undead infestations. That's why they used the believers' money for food and supplies. She further argued that banning cigars and alcohol would cause their divine energy to decrease. Itsuki, looking confused, asked what she meant by that. Teresa didn't know how Itsuki learned about it, but she explained that if someone harmed an innocent person, their divine energy would decrease. However, if they became a martyr for their faith, they would receive the goddess's blessing. Itsuki got the general idea and wondered if, by continuing to pray, he would eventually be able to use healing magic. Teresa said that it was possible if he had genuine faith. With deep faith, Itsuki's divine energy would definitely increase. The higher the divine energy, the stronger the holy magic he could use. That was why the Pope and Saintess were chosen based on the strength of their divine energy. She added that this was the reason someone like her, a Saintess, existed. Itsuki froze, trying to reject what he was hearing. The Saintess he knew seemed noble and smelled like flowers, but the one standing before him was carrying a huge weapon and smelled of alcohol and cigarettes. He said Teresa didn't look like a Saintess at all. His words angered the other nuns, who were protective of their captain. Teresa then admitted that she was an exception and even she couldn't believe it sometimes. The nuns, however, praised her, saying their captain was the Saintess she was meant to be. Itsuki then wondered what the captain title was all about that the nuns kept using for Teresa. One of the nuns proudly announced that Teresa was the one and only captain of the chivalric order of priestesses, who slayed the undead and saved innocent citizens. Teresa, clearly embarrassed, told her to stop. Itsuki wasn't sure what to believe. Then Teresa, with her small frame, spun the massive cross weapon and asked him what he thought. She explained that with the goddess's blessings, all her muscles had become stronger, but she was sad because her body had grown too firm and unwomanly. She even called the goddess mean for doing that to her. Itsuki asked if she hated the power she had. Teresa admitted it was obvious, but at least she didn't look overly muscular. Itsuki then called her power cool. The room fell silent. Itsuki admired how Teresa still helped people despite disliking her own strength. He said the goddess had a good sense of character after all, and he called Teresa a true saintess. Teresa's eyes began to well up with tears, and the other nuns, moved by Itsuki's words, rushed to comfort their captain. But Teresa, overwhelmed with embarrassment, started to throw a tantrum, swinging her giant cross around, causing the other nuns to panic. Meanwhile, Shiro casually told Itsuki how good the food was, and a tied-up Itsuki desperately asked for help to get out of the ropes. Soon after, there was a pile of nuns on the floor while Teresa remained standing. Itsuki looked worried and Teresa glared at him. She apologized for showing such an embarrassing and messy scene. To ease the situation, she offered him a cup of wine as a peace offering. Itsuki, however, was more concerned about the nuns who had been beaten up and were kneeling on the floor. He offered a potion to help them recover, and Teresa hesitated, wondering if it was okay to accept it. She mentioned that the church had a herb garden and she could at least repay him with herbs. However, she told him not to worry, explaining that the nuns had actually asked for the beating. Itsuki became curious about the herb garden, and Teresa offered to show it to him later. Teresa then looked at the potion more closely and questioned whether Itsuki had really made it, as it appeared to be of high quality. From just observing it, she could tell the skill level needed to make it was impressive. Itsuki then admitted that he was a drifter, someone who could level up quickly. Upon hearing this, Teresa assumed he had gained a strong skill from the goddess. Itsuki denied having anything particularly strong and asked if she wanted to see it. He then used a skill called pocket money. His hand shone brightly and 5 gold coins appeared. He explained that it was just a skill to make money. However, Teresa's and the nuns' reactions were concerning. Itsuki began to assume that what he did might be considered forgery. Teresa grabbed his hand and asked what kind of divine energy he possessed, leaving Itsuki confused. The other nuns were equally shocked, seeing that each coin was overflowing with divine energy, making them appear blessed. Teresa examined the coin and noticed it wasn't officially minted, but it could still be used in rituals. An unbelievably rare item. Itsuki had been casually creating these coins every day, but he had only just realized how extraordinary they were. The nuns then asked if Itsuki could trade one of his coins for 2 regular ones. After one of the nuns made the first move, the rest followed, swarming around Itsuki. In the end, each nun received a blessed coin. Teresa apologized for the trouble and said she owed him a favor. Itsuki wasn't bothered by it at all. Teresa then realized she hadn't properly introduced herself yet. Itsuki introduced himself and Shiro did the same. Teresa asked why Itsuki was at the church, and Itsuki admitted that he was just sightseeing and passing the time before the auction event. Teresa assumed he was there for a preliminary inspection. Itsuki was surprised, and Teresa couldn't believe he had come without knowing that the church was the auction venue. Since the church was the major sponsor, she led Itsuki to the auction hall. Itsuki found himself in an underground section of the cathedral and realized how suspicious it felt. Teresa noticed his reaction and assumed he was getting the wrong idea again. She explained that most of the participants were nobles despite it being an underground auction. The church managed it to ensure fairness as a neutral party. She asked Itsuki to imagine an auction where both the organizers and participants were nobles. Surely they would manipulate things behind the scenes. Itsuki agreed that something like that could definitely happen. Soon after, Itsuki decided to leave and the nuns respectfully bid him farewell. He was surprised to see all the nuns coming out to send him off. Itsuki's companions were confused and Wendy asked if something had happened. Sorta assumed Itsuki had caused trouble again. Annoyed, Itsuki pinched both of Sorte's cheeks. He then decided to return to the mansion and got into the carriage where Fried was waiting. Hayato welcomed him back and asked about his sightseeing. Itsuki said it had been interesting in many ways. He then jokingly asked if Hayato had received a marriage proposal from the kingdom's princess. Hayato laughed it off, but Letty was not amused by the joke. Hayato then invited everyone to dinner and they all gathered around the table to enjoy a hearty meal. While eating, Itsuki and Hayato had a conversation and the girls chatted among themselves. After dinner, the conversations continued and even Fried joined the 2 drifters. Meanwhile, the girls stepped out onto the balcony to enjoy the night breeze and continue their talk. Later, everyone went to the bath and Sorta relaxed, feeling like she was melting in the warm water. Renga mentioned it was likely because they had been taking cold baths outdoors during their journey. Aina and Wendy knew their bath at home was splendid, but Hayato's mansion bath, made by the royal court craftsman, was also exceptional. Wendy noticed something was off with Aina and asked if something was wrong. Aina hesitated, blushed, and then went quiet, leaving Wendy confused. As the night ended, Itsuki said goodnight to Hayato after their long conversation. Fried escorted Itsuki back to his room, mentioning how interesting their stories had been. Itsuki invited Fried to share some of his own stories over a drink. Meanwhile, Aina was quietly hiding in the shadows, watching Itsuki. After Fried said goodnight, Itsuki collapsed into bed, feeling it had been a while since he'd slept in one. The comfort was unmatched and he quickly drifted off to sleep, too tired to keep his eyes open. Unbeknownst to Itsuki, Aina silently opened the door to his room. With a blush on her face, she set her sights on her master. That is the end of the recap at chapter 46. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.